This is a Film Stories original podcast.
If you own a vehicle with less than 200,000 miles and have an auto warranty about to expire or no warranty coverage at all, listen up. CarShield has a low-cost month-to-month vehicle protection plan that covers more parts than ever. Visit carshield.com/audio to find out how you could pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Get your free quote today at carshield.com/audio. That's carshield.com/audio.
We made this.
Welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. Thanks for joining our discussion of Hollywood AD, the 19th episode of the 7th season of The X-Files. I'm your host, Marlene Stemme, and I'm happy to be joined today by Cathy Glinski. Hey, Cathy.
Hi, Marlene.
How's it going today?
It's going really good.
Good. Are you looking forward to this episode discussion?
I love this episode. I'm really excited to talk about it.
Great. So this one was, of course, written and directed by David Duchovny, and it aired for the first time on April 30th, 2000. In this episode, Mulder and Scully are the subject of a film about their case investigating the Lazarus Bowl, essentially. And I was going to do more of a summary, but really, there's no plot description would do this justice.
David had a description of it, which I loved. I read this in an interview. He said, "There's a super serious case investigated by Mulder and Scully and a satiric look at Hollywood tied together by a hilariously bad cinematic version of the case and dancing zombies."
I think that's great.
Right?
It really gets
it all in there.
Yeah, I guess the two-sided nature of the episode as well. We're going to start with a little bit of discussion just of the episode and of David Duchovny's writing. This is his second auteur effort on The X-Files, the first being The Unnatural. So what do you think about it, just in terms of his writing and how it fits in with Season 7?
I like his writing style, and it's definitely a style that's his. He has a way of looking at the world and the show and these characters that's light, but can deal with some more weighty themes. But you always sense that lightness there. There's something good. There's something happy. Thematically, within Season 7... it just sort of depends. You know what? I always come back to the timeline issue with this episode because it can't be reconciled with the rest of the series. Where when we flash back, we're 18 months earlier, but they would not have been on the X-Files. That would have been between Fight the Future and the beginning. And they weren't. The office was burned down, and we see the office in this episode. They weren't necessarily on the X-Files. They weren't working for Skinner. So that's strange to me.
I hadn't thought about it in those terms, like looking back with the literal timeline. That's very interesting, though.
And the thing is, the script places it 2 years earlier, which is exactly right. At end of Season 5, this would have fit perfectly. But then when we're flashing forward to the present day, then you have to think about where that fits in and where, if we want the flashback to fit in at the end of Season 5, then in the present day, it would have been earlier than the episode actually aired. And maybe but so then we know that there's something significant going on in Mulder and Scully's relationship at that time. So I think about the timeline a lot, and I think that David thought about it not at all when he wrote it. I think he was writing, here's a story.
Right.
Which
a movie takes about this long to make. So,
right. Yeah. And so, I feel like I shouldn't get hung up on that, and I should just enjoy the episode for what it is. But I am also someone who watches The X-Files in order over and over again, and I want to know. I want to know where this fits. I want to make sense of the timeline.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we've discussed this before, too, you and I, that I tend to watch The X-Files. Unlike other TV shows, I watch The X-Files more almost in a way that I would think that David would write this, where it's like, oh, this reminds me of this. That reminds me of this one that connects to this. So I just can't get into watching them straight through as a series in order.
Yeah.
So I think that I let that go sometimes, but it's good to, that's it's an interesting consideration if it had it come after season 5, given the lead in to the movie and what this does kind of referentially to Fight the Future, I think. So that's a kind of cool way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I liked it as an episode within season 7 just because I think it has that kind of the whimsy that I liked from season 7. I know season 7 isn't popular with everybody, but I rather like it. And I think that it has that kind of, that spoof of the mythology that started the season with the Biogenesis trilogy that I enjoy as well. But it kind of takes it seriously and not seriously at the same time. And I also think that it would have been a good way to wind down the series had the X-Files ended at the end of season 7. Because I think at this point, they didn't know what they were going into.
Right.
So I think that it really had a lot of the ideas and the character qualities that it developed from the entire series. So I think that would have been a curious thing if it had ended at the end of season 7. And this kind of would be like a final, one of Mulder and Scully's final moments. Really.
Yeah,
so
I agree with that. I think it does fit in that respect. And you do see versions of them that we've been working towards for a long time. And I like the idea of let's wrap up the show by just really make a movie about them. I think that's a nice thought that we could have ended at the end of season 7, having recently seen this, and that would have been a nice closure for the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like you said, the weightier issues, but then like not so serious after all. You know, I think that would be a good end to it. But it is still enjoyable as it is. So, what would you give the episode in a ranking out of 10?
My rankings don't make sense from time to time. If you listen to other episodes I've done, the things that I've ranked. So I'm just going, for today, I'm giving Hollywood AD an 8.5. I don't like it quite as much as I like The Unnatural, which I ranked a 9.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I like it a lot. And I never, I enjoy it every single time I watch it. So it's high up there. But I can't call it perfect. There are some things that don't quite work for me.
That is interesting. I also, for today, I'm going to give it an 8.5 as well. So same ranking. Uh-huh. When I first saw this episode, when it first came on, I thought it was a little, like David Duchovny trying to be erudite and whatnot. And I enjoyed aspects of it, but I don't think I got it all. I mean, it's definitely one that you get more and more from multiple viewings. So it still goes a little bit, back and forth, in my opinion. But with the rewatching it to record this with you, I was kind of taken by it again. So 8.5 might be a little low, but I would also say that I would give it kind of like a bonus half point for ambition. It's like
I'm with you on that.
It's like if it were a gymnastics routine, it doesn't stick all the landings, but it has a higher difficulty rating than some of the other ones that are solid but don't strive as hard. Maybe
that's perfect. I like that.
Yeah. Well, we have both, we've overshot the IMDb rating, I'll tell you that. Do you know what that is?
No, I didn't look at that.
It got a 7.5 out of 10.
Huh, okay.
So, a little skewered on the low end for an episode that I think is, kind of more momentous than that, but that's what they gave it.
And I think what you said is right, is you have to watch this several times to get everything you're supposed to get. Mm-hmm. And on a first viewing, I might have given it a 7.5 also.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. I think I would have as well. Ready to get into the scenes?
I am.
I should start by saying that most scenes in this episode could be a podcast in themselves, so we're going to try to contain it. So we start with the movie theater, the scene in the movie theater, except we are watching the movie at first, and we have Gary Shandling as Mulder holding the Lazarus Bowl. We'll come to know it as the Lazarus Bowl, and then a bunch of zombies with guns. And then there's a priest holding Scully hostage, offering to trade Scully for this bowl that Mulder's holding. Mulder says if he breaks the Lazarus Bowl, all the priest's sniper zombies go back to being well-behaved little corpses. All right.
It's so ludicrous.
It is. It starts off ludicrous.
Yeah.
And then the priest says that the Lazarus Bowl is Mulder's holy grail. And he has this line that, I'm watching this, I'm like, this is ridiculous, but this still kind of enjoy it. That encoded in its ancient ceramic grooves are the words, Jesus spake when he raised Lazarus from the dead. Oh, God. I thought was a spark of genius, I thought, having Jesus spake.
Spake, yeah.
Yeah. And it's still capable of raising the dead 2,000 years later. Proof positive of the paranormal. My reflection on this is that I'm sure sometimes in my earlier viewings I fast-forwarded through this just to get to the main episode, but there was an occasion a few years ago, I think, when I was like, well, I'm just going to watch it. And then I had like a little spark of what more it was about, I guess. But what are your thoughts on this early start to the episode?
Thought is I really want to hear what your spark is. I think it sets up a really campy, ridiculous movie that I really want to know how we got to the point that we're seeing Mulder and Scully in a movie. The themes, I think, are what we're going to be looking at throughout, the paranormal, the raised from the dead, all this stuff. And Mulder's Holy Grail, I thought was an interesting touch. Is that really what Mulder's looking for? Or is Scully what he's looking for? Those are the things that pop out to me about the teaser.
Okay, well, that kind of ties in, I think, because it's the idea of the Holy Grail, and then also this idea of trading something for Scully, because I think it's a parallel to, it kind of a spoof of the Endgame scene on the bridge.
Yeah, good point.
Which maybe I just took a while to think of that, but it took me, like I said, a number of viewings before I was like, oh, so this priest that we don't know yet who it is holding, fake Scully the same way that the bounty hunter was holding Scully on the bridge and then offering this trade. Even their positioning is kind of similar. So, I don't know. I liked that. I thought that David tried to do the imagery maybe similarly to that, and I appreciated that part of it.
And we do know that there's stuff in this trailer that we don't see as we see Mulder and Scully working the case with Fetterman. So Fetterman got this information, like the ifs, ands, or bees. Obviously the bee is a reference to Fight the Future, so that also brings up a timeline issue that I hadn't considered.
But there's also a coincidence issue, too. Like, if does one thing necessarily cause something else, or is there something that prefigures something else, too? So that's a difficult call.
It is, okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be that Fight the Future was before or after this in order to have that line. In other words.
Well, true. I mean, there are other bees before.
Well, no, I mean that it could tie into it, but it not necessarily be causal.
Okay.
If we're going to go with the logic of this entire episode.
If we are going to look at this through David Duchovny's eyes, which is all its poetry, don't take anything literally, the bees, we as X-Files viewers know what that reference is, whether it can be explained or not.
Right.
Okay, all right, I'm good with that.
Okay, so one of the zombies, we're still in the movie, one of the zombies says that the zombies don't want to go back to being dead, and if Mulder saves the bowl, they'll dump the Siggy smoking stooge, they call him, and he'll be the new king of the dead. So, of course, this is sort of that religious parallel to Amor Fati with CSM, offering Mulder this life of leisure and pleasure and affluence and so forth. It's kind of bargain with the devil.
Right.
Albeit in a sniper hunting zombie package in this. And then Mulder has the line, I'd rather serve in heaven than rule in hell.
Right.
And throws the bowl.
Yeah.
So then, like you mentioned, they're in this coffin. They roll down the hill into the coffin. The lid closes, which is very much, I think, in keeping with the Ed Wood movie that we'll see later on.
Right.
Just super, super cheesy imagery, but it's fun. And then just like cheesy sexual dialogue and peals of laughter. Yeah. So we see that they're in a movie theater. And they're at the Daryl Zanuck Theater, 20th Century Fox in Hollywood. Right.
Here's where, and I'm probably going to keep coming back to this, but the timeline issue. You see that it pans over and Scully's just horrified at seeing this, and Mulder is, buries his face in his hands, and Skinner's just smiling away. And so it makes you wonder where they are in their relationship at this point. Because clearly people who have been observing them have seen them as a potential couple, right? Because that's how it translates on the screen. That's what Fetterman saw when he met them, and so he puts that in the movie. So
I have a different interpretation.
I know you do. I'm speaking for the shippers out there.
Okay, that's fair.
So, but then Mulder and Scully are horrified at seeing this, and I wonder if the horror is that they're uncomfortable together at seeing something that hasn't happened on screen, or if they're uncomfortable thinking, oh my gosh, everyone knows this about us, and placement of the present changes that. I think the final scene answers that question for us, but we're not there yet, so I'll say that.
Okay. Now I'm sure we'll get into that. Because for me, the final scene when Mulder says, they got it so wrong, Scully, to me that answers it as well. That regardless of what anyone takes from their relationship or is making of it on the surface, like, that image that they're watching is wrong.
Well,
period.
She had just said she loves Walter Skinner. I mean, that's wrong.
That's just.
But I think that, everything about that scene is wrong. But maybe not. I don't feel that necessarily for the same reasons you do.
Okay. All right. So we go to the scene of the audience. Chris Carter is munching on his popcorn. And we see a few other, Hollywood luminaries of the era. And then we see Téa Leoni and Gary Shandling, so forth. I have to say, of Téa Leoni, I always enjoy her kind of, whatever it is about her comic presentation, there's something that's very dry about it, but then kind of, I don't know, just kooky at the same time. Well, and she's kind of staring at the screen. Like, I don't know, I just thought it was a funny expression.
She's, sort of unhinged looking. It was like...
Yeah, she is.
But I think that's her comic styling. I mean, she seems like a wacky, I guess, but dry at the same time, which is hard to achieve, but she does.
Right, and we'll probably address that when we get into the running scene on the movie set later as well. Moving down the road, we come to this, I would say, very nonplussed looking Mulder and Scully, watching with disdain as the characters based on them keep making out on screen. Mulder puts his head in his hands and he kind of glares at Skinner in the next section over, and Skinner grins back. Like, it's just the most amusing thing he's ever seen. And so Mulder just drops his head, shakes his head. Not all is well in the movie theater.
Right. They are.
We don't know.
I wouldn't call them nonplussed. I think they're shocked to see this.
Yeah. I would say horrified. But
horrified is good. Yeah. They definitely, they're horrified. And my question is, on what level? So.
Right.
Yeah.
So we start the episode, it's 18 months earlier in Skinner's office, and you've already mentioned that kind of timeline thing. So we've started in the middle, really, or toward the end of the episode. Now we're going to find out how he got there. Mm-hmm. So Skinner's telling Mulder and Scully about a pipe bomb that ripped through Christchurch, the crypt at Christchurch in D.C.
Right.
And we see a man sitting on the couch behind Mulder and Scully, and he starts making voice notes in a tape recorder. And all of this is very, kind of metatextual, this very X-Files, self-referential thing, which... My thoughts on it, I like a little of it. I feel like one of my criticisms of the episode is I feel like there's just too much of that. Like, it gets a little too clever in points. And here...
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity. And the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
The man is saying, she, Jodie Foster's foster child on a Payless budget. And he's like a Jehovah's Witness meets Harrison Ford's witness.
Uh-huh.
So, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's funny. It's clever. It's that same Clarice Starling, being an inspiration for Scully kind of reference. Right. As well as what he says in a minute about the movie he's making is, what does he say? It's a Silence of the Lambs meets Greatest Story Ever Told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to go back to the fact that who Wayne Fetterman is, why he's even there, because Skinner says, well, maybe we're not going back. Maybe we're still going forward. So he's an old college buddy of Skinner, which is a little hard for me to buy, except that I thought, okay, well, because Skinner's clearly quite a bit older than Wade Fetterman when I look at them. But Skinner did not go to college until after his Vietnam service, so I can accept it. I can say that they could be classmates because Skinner would have been older than people he went to college with. Other than the fact that how I could not imagine Walter Skinner and Wade Fetterman being friends.
Keeping up with each other. No, I can't either.
But Fetterman's the kind of guy who wants a story and he's going to go after what he can get, and maybe reached out to Skinner and just
looked up, classmate,
I
can see that.
The fact that Skinner is the one who introduces them to Fetterman, that brings Fetterman to them, I wanted to mention that David really wanted to write a story for Skinner. That's what he said. He felt that Mitch Pileggi is underused, and he really wanted to make that happen. He had tried in Avatar in season 3. That was his story idea, but his story idea was really Skinner focused, and this beautiful spirit fell in love with Skinner and then threatened Scully because she misinterpreted Scully's intentions towards Skinner. And it just didn't happen. It came out to be a Mulder and Scully episode. So he was trying again with Hollywood AD. And again, it turned into a Mulder and Scully story, but Skinner was still given some really great moments. So I thought that was fun to see. And then Fetterman himself is just, I find him hilarious. I think some of the stuff, some of his, I don't have a problem with the self-referential things. I didn't see too much of that from him, I guess. The Jodie Foster reference,
Yeah, I think that's funny. It's more when we get into the Taleone, Gary Shandling. It's like, that's funny.
Sure.
But...
I agree with you on that. And so David's description of this Wayne Fetterman character, who is named Wayne Fetterman after the actor.
Right. It's like, I love it when that happens.
But he said he's someone who has an intuitive grasp of storytelling. He's a bore and he's rude, and he's a caricature of a stock Hollywood character, but he's insightful even when he doesn't know he's being insightful. And I think that's interesting right from the start. It's like, this guy is obnoxious. He's talking over them and through them and around them, and but there's a method to his madness. He's got something, which we come to find out. But I like that David didn't want to just make this obnoxious character just to be an obnoxious character. He was actually trying to show something with that.
I like Fetterman. I wouldn't want to spend much time with him, but I think that he's a likable character, even though he's, I would say, like, mostly on the surface, but then, like you said, like, there's some things he just, like, instantly gets. Yeah, like, to me, it's an upcoming scene when they're in Micah Hoffman's studio, and he puts together when he's giving all the, like, the countercultural references, and he puts together that the real mystery is what O'Fallon is doing with Hoffman's forgeries of the documents. And Mulder and Scully are like, he kind of got us on that one.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But right now he's just being kind of annoying. And he says Mulder doesn't want to have anything to do with them. Scully has explained basically that Cardinal O'Fallon, who is at the Christ Church, is one of the most powerful men in the church today, and his name often comes up as a possibility for the first American pope. So we're sort of, I think, looking back, we're introducing at this point that Scully is going to have some sort of story in this too. Like, there's a point to her explaining that. I mean, obviously she's Catholic and she would know, that history, but I think that kind of introduces her narrative as well.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. But then we kind of scoot back over to Fetterman, and he's talking about how he doesn't want to eat Mulder's lunch. He just wants some procedural flavor just to taste. So he has all these, like, eating-related words, That's just how he talks.
One of my favorite parts of that scene is when Mulder says to Skinner, that's a bit myopic, and he goes, myopic.
Right. And he says that Skinner told him that Mulder and Scully come at things like a little Fakatka, a little Star Trek-y, and that's the vibe he's looking for. So my Yiddish is poor, as you can imagine, so I did not know what Fakatka meant, and it's apparently means just like messed up and crazy.
Right.
So, and he says he's going to be strictly Heisenbergian.
Yeah, I love that. A hologram.
I do.
I had to look that up. And you know what? In the script, it just says, I'll be strictly Heisenbergian, and just leaves it at that. He doesn't go like a hologram.
Yeah.
So they realized by the time they made the episode, give your viewers a little more, David. We're not all as smart as you are.
Right. Although I'm not sure that makes entire sense based on like what I then read in my research.
I know. It's like, there's only so much quantum mechanics I can understand. I have to stop here.
It's like, all right, I'm going to have to get another degree in order to understand this episode properly.
Yeah, it's the lost cause. I'll just laugh at the
left. It's fun, though. You go down those rabbit holes of research.
Yeah.
So Skinner assigns Fetterman into Mulder's care and company for research at Christ Church and to go and meet Cardinal O'Fallon, and he tells Scully that he requires her services at the Bureau.
Yeah.
Fetterman kind of notices this.
Yeah.
And makes more of it, I think, than is warranted. But, I mean, that's just kind of who he is. He's looking for some sort of story.
Does it make you wonder what Skinner has been telling Fetterman about Scully? I mean, Because there are a couple of times throughout where, Fetterman, raises his eyebrows. And then, of course, at the end in the movie, we see that Scully's in love with Assistant Director Skinner. Mm-hmm. Is that something, do you think Skinner was embellishing as he was talking to his good buddy, the screenwriter?
See, I never took it as Skinner talking to him at all. I kind of, you said that you didn't think that they would be buddies or whatever. I think he probably just contacted him. I mean, that's just my interpretation. I just assume that Fetterman is looking for anything on the surface that could be put into a movie that would have some sort of,
right. He's
audience appeal to it.
He's the storyteller. He knows what makes a good story. Yeah.
Right. So he's, and then once we start the next scene, when they go to meet Cardinal O'Fallon, you hear Wayne kind of, in my opinion, intrusively asking Mulder, I'm just asking if she's more than your partner and so forth. And it's I think it's kind of making fun of people that are well, what are they doing? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? To me, it's kind of a spoof on that, insistent asking what is the nature of their relationship, because Fetterman's doing it too. And I don't know what I would make of the whole thing with Skinner, but I could see Fetterman and then what if I put Walter Skinner in this? So he's writing his friend in there, and Skinner probably loved it because he loved the attention. So that's what my interpretation was.
I do actually think that Fetterman and Skinner are talking because we hear him mention that, Skin Man's keeping me in the loop.
Right, about this case. I take that as being about the case.
But I also do think that maybe there's something that Skinner's, when he gets caught up in, I'm talking to a screenwriter, I'm going to tell him a really good story. But it also is quite possible that the whole, one of the themes of the episode is the story is what the story being told is. I mean, whoever tells the story gets to choose the ending, and so it could just be that Fetterman is finding an interesting thing to throw in.
Right.
As for him talking to asking
Hollywood thing.
Yeah, exactly. But with him asking, Mulder, what's the nature of your relationship? I don't know that it was poking fun at, but it was definitely acknowledging where this series was. Okay, it's been 7 years. What is the nature of your relationship? So I don't think David was antagonistic towards the question. I think he was just acknowledging that those questions are there, and rightfully so. Yeah.
I think there are other things in the episode that, not making fun of it, but that there's not a way to categorize it. It shouldn't be categorized. And Wayne is just wanting some little neat story for his movie.
Right. Yeah.
But then sometimes the neat stories come true, so it's just a whole mess.
Yeah. I was just going to talk about O'Fallon.
Yeah, let's go for it, because they go in, they basically are meeting O'Fallon in the church, Mulder with Fetterman tagging along.
David's description of O'Fallon, he said he loved this actor's performance, and this character, exactly what he was trying to show was a dry sense of humor, a supposedly very serious character, but he had a sense of what's funny. And so he is this, he's this stock religious character, but he also makes the joke about the bathrobe and the cell phone reception and the refrigerator, and it shows he's aware of the world. He's not just this cloistered religious figure. He's actually he's funny, which is intelligent, and he knows what's going on in the world. So, and I think that's a really good description of the character we ended up seeing on screen too.
I do too. I think that character he plays a big part in the episode, but he's not in that much of it as a character. But I think that he is sort of fully developed in a way, because he does, as you said, have that humor and that kind of, dry sense of what the world is like, either in conjunction with or as opposed to what the church is to him. Mm-hmm. And then in some of the upcoming scenes where he's kind of wrestling, I think, with that contrast, when he's talking to Mulder about the forgeries that he didn't know were forgeries, you see more of his sort of passion and pathos or whatever, in terms of what he's struggling with. So I think is it Harris Yulin, was the actor, I believe, that played that character. I thought he did a great job. And I think it even in the writing, it's a developed character for the time that he has in there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So they're talking about, again, he makes the comment about the artifacts and the documents that are stored in the crypt that have been bombed and how it's God's refrigerator. He likes to think of it as God's refrigerator. And that there's nothing of value to the outside world, but things of great value to the church. This whole time, Wayne Fetterman is making voice notes, and Mulder is telling him to shut up because he's being annoying. And when Cardinal O'Fallon says that they have things that are of great value to the church, that's when Fetterman asks if they have the Shroud of Turin. And Cardinal Fallon says, like, no, but we do have the bathrobe of St. Peter.
Really?
Which I like.
Yeah, I thought that was really clever.
So also he says he walks through the catacombs at lunch. Like, that's a very kind of human thing. It's a little odd to walk through catacombs rather than, like, I walk through the park at lunch. But at the same time, he's getting his exercise at lunch. And I noticed on this viewing that we see the little skull that comes up with the skeleton in a future scene on the floor.
Okay.
In there, which I thought was kind of interesting.
All right.
Yeah. And so Mulder starts. He's got a theory. He starts about the bomb being a terrorist attack and so forth. And then the phone rings. And all of them check their phones. And that is a funny scene, I think. Them checking their phones. And when Cardinal O'Fallon says, like, we never get reception down here.
Yeah.
But they find the phone on a body. Phone's clasped in his hand. And the phone says Micah Hoffman.
Right.
So, and Mulder seems to recognize...
He seemed to recognize him physically.
He recognized... Yeah, yes. Exactly. As Micah Hoffman. Not just reading on the phone Micah Hoffman.
Right. Which was a weird detail.
Yeah.
Because I don't think phones do that, but...
show up, like, with your name on your own phone?
Right.
Like he's calling himself?
He's calling himself.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Okay. So then we're going to rejoin Scully. Mulder, Scully, and Fetterman go to what turns out to be Micah Hoffman's lab. So they're in the Adams-Morgan district in D.C., and Mulder is getting giddy at this point. He's talking about he says his holy trinity. So his heroes are Micah Hoffman, Willie Mays, and Frank Serpico. And we're kind of getting from this that Mulder is excited about these various countercultural figures and campus radicals and so forth. Although I can't see Mulder being... I don't get it that he was a part of that. He may have just kind of admired their outsider status or something about their resistance.
Yeah, he wasn't old enough. I mean, Scully says, well, I'm not old enough, but I mean, neither Mulder nor Scully were old enough to appreciate this at the time because Mulder was born in 1961. But I think he studied that is what we're supposed to get. The character of Hoffman, David based on a very specific person, a man named Mark Hoffman, who forged documents that were detrimental to the Mormon church and then sold them to the church officials who kept them hidden, not really realizing they were forgeries. So a very real character that David was using, and that Mark Hoffman also claimed he could become Joseph Smith. So I thought that was really interesting. But then also the Hoffman was related to Abby Hoffman, and David said that sort of surprised himself that he had written this character. And then someone pointed out, oh yeah, the name Hoffman is like Abby Hoffman, and he's this guy from the countercultural movement. And he hadn't really planned that. It was more serendipitous.
Yeah.
And then the actor who played Micah Hoffman had just played Abby Hoffman in something else. So that was an interesting
I love
tie-in.
that,
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it's poetic in the sense of being associative, Mulder gets excited about in this episode. So I like those things. It's really cool.
And I have to point out that the scene where Mulder, Scully, and Fetterman are walking towards Hoffman's apartment is one of the most enjoyable pictures of their height difference.
It is. It's just dramatized by the landscape.
And plus, I think Fetterman is pretty tall, too. So, here's tiny little Scully with these two. It's just a very pleasing scene.
It's interesting because we don't see them on, landscape like that too often because they're clearly walking up a, pretty steep hill. And I just don't think we see Mulder and Scully walking in that way where the walking is something that you're really paying attention to.
Yeah.
And it heightens the height difference.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I noticed that. I hadn't remembered that, but I noticed that too in that moment. And then we have a little reference here to Altamont, and I think that this is how I learned about Altamont was from this episode, because apparently...
Me too.
Really?
I didn't know this stuff.
I learned so much.
I had to look it up.
Yeah. The Rolling Stones had, at the recommendation of the Grateful Dead, had hired the Hells Angels to do security at a show, I think it was in late 1969 at Altamont, and one of the Hells Angels apparently killed somebody in the crowd, and so it just became this big... kind of end of the 60s, sort of, I guess, an emblem of the turmoil of that era, too, I suppose. But Mulder says that Hoffman was never heard from after Altamont. Doesn't specify what he had to do with it, but Hoffman later says that he was totally bumming after Altamont.
Right. And Fetterman says, the Stones get blamed for everything.
Everything, right.
I had, not for this recording, but previously I had to look up Altamont and the Stones because of this episode. So I didn't get it until then.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite things is they're going to enter the apartment. Scully says, "We should have a warrant." And Fetterman says, "It's only the Constitution."
Constitution, yeah.
And I love that Duchovny is poking fun at the way Mulder and Scully usually work.
Yeah.
You know, they never care about probable cause or warrants or constitutional rights. And I love that he's acknowledging that. I mean, the fact that it's only the Constitution, it just thrills me.
I like that line too. And I think it's funny that it's Fetterman that is, as much as he just seems like he's kind of on the surface of things, he has this deeper understanding of what they're doing in the law.
It's like, it's typical Hollywood to ignore things like warrants and constitutional rights, and yet here's Fetterman, the Hollywood guy, who's pointing it out, which I think is just a brilliant little twist.
Yeah, I do too. So they go in, Mulder picks the lock, again, like you said, they're not just going in, Mulder's picking the lock, and inside there are this series of kind of interesting paintings, sort of depicting nude embraces and interesting paintings of Jesus and so forth, so it looks like to me. Scully, I think it's interesting here, Scully remarks that she started to denigrate a third of Mulder's Trinity, but it looks like Hoffman was killed by one of his own bombs. I thought it was interesting that she said that at that moment, a third of Mulder's Trinity, given what she's looking at in the studio, which you think is denigrating at least a third of her Trinity.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I had not thought of that at all. See, now I need to watch it again.
I know.
I love this.
I
love this.
So Fetterman keeps making all these counterculture puns that are kind of entertaining. Mulder is, of course, getting kind of put out with them.
I had to look up the Dharma Bums thing. I didn't get that one.
I think I looked that up before. I didn't look it up this time, so I don't remember.
It roll over maybe in the past, but this time I had to look it up. So, okay. So I got that one finally.
Yeah. Did you want to say what it is?
Oh, it's a reference to a Kerouac novel, After on the Road. That's all I know. I can't tell you any more than
Dharma
that.
Bums to Dharma Bomb.
Yeah.
So Scully notes that Hoffman has the chemicals for forgery, and she's kind of going, not into the chemistry of it, but naming the chemicals and so forth.
Right.
And then Fetterman is the one that finds the sample of Hoffman's works, religious texts. And Mulder asks Scully if she can read Greek. She says her Greek is pretty rusty.
But she can still figure out that it's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. For rusty
and read
Greek.
it. And,
yeah, right.
Right, giving an account of Christ's life on earth after the resurrection.
Yeah.
And she says it's a heretical text, like a mythical text, but one rumored to be in existence, which she probably, I could see that she would know that part of it already. Yeah. But she is clearly reading the text in order to figure out what it is.
Do doctors study Greek? I know that, pastors are,
Maybe. Well,
doctors of ordination, in seminary you read Greek.
Divinity?
Divinity, that's the word. Doctors of divinity read Greek, but why would a medical doctor read Greek? Would they? I don't know.
Well, I would assume it would come from, especially since she's saying it's pretty rusty, it may have come from when she was in Catholic school, although I don't know. I'm not Catholic. I don't know if they studied Greek or not.
Same.
But I guess that was my thought more so than with medical school.
I think maybe just because Scully knows everything.
Well, and I think that's part of it as well. I could see that being like another little playful thing that David put in there. It's like, of course Scully can read Greek. Of course Scully can, she just knows how to fly a helicopter. She knows how to do any number of things.
She knows weather radar. She knows.
Yeah. So she can also read Greek.
Okay. I buy it.
And so Mulder asks what Hoffman would be doing with a heretical religious text. And then Scully kind of one-ups that, saying the real question is what would Hoffman be doing forging them?
Right.
And Fetterman then says that the real question is what would O'Fallon be doing with Hoffman's forgeries?
Right. And they are both duly impressed with that.
Yeah.
That connection.
Yeah. And then what is his comment about you don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows.
Don't shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. I like this Fetterman guy.
Yeah. I did too, and I like the way that he was used to kind of get them to the next point in the story as well. I thought that came together, and because my favorite thing in all of the X-Files is that Mulder and Scully kind of conversation and the way they can piece their different ideas together to come up with a solution. So having this other character there that really, truly is a character that is the one that is like, well, this is really what's happening. I thought that was a neat twist.
Yeah, I agree.
Mulder and Fetterman go back to Christ Church. They're walking through the crypt. And this is the scene when they find scraps of the Gospel of Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And Fetterman, of course, asks if it's real, and Mulder says there's no real Gospel of Mary, so the original would be a fake.
And this is a fake or a real fake?
Right. So they're having that conversation when Fetterman's phone rings, and he walks off, and as he's walking off, he sees parts of this skeleton reassembling a clay bowl. So
yeah,
you heard a clicking noise earlier, and then you see that.
Yeah, right. And the script describes it as like lobsters running across the linoleum. Like, of course, yeah.
Right.
And then it gets louder, like a whole bunch of crabs piled on top of each other.
Because of like, oh, of course, the crew is going to know what that sounds like.
I just thought it was enjoyable. This scene, I don't know how I feel about it. It's very kitschy.
Okay.
It's very kitschy. It's silly.
Yeah.
The music is very silly, but is that the point? So I don't know.
Well, also the flashlight in the skull, like the light, going through the eyes, all that.
Yeah. So I don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I hate it, and I think it probably works for the silliness. I don't know. It seems at this point they're still doing the investigation of the serious case, and here's where we jump to silliness, and it seems very abrupt because up until this point it's all been serious,
been serious,
and then we get this music and animated skeletons and Scooby-Doo kind of stuff.
Right. It's very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
It's very Scooby-Doo. I recall not liking it when it first aired, and I think that I not like it less than I did then. It's better.
It is probably... Yeah, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was going to say the one thing, and this may be a stretch, but I think the thing that it reminds me of that's serious, and this is the very sort of overly whimsical version, isn't it in Biogenesis? And it's in the Biogenesis trilogy, like the things coming back to life and rebuilding themselves when in the presence of the ship. So I think this whole episode really kind of plays off of that. So that was, when I keep that in mind, that this is supposed to be the kitschy version of reanimation, then I'm like, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's the most jarring tonal shift, and I get caught up on it every time. I'm like, eh.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I could also see what you're saying about this is the kitschy version of the scene in Sixth Extinction. I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is always my stumbling point when I'm watching the episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that for sure. No, I do like the part in our next scene when Fetterman is telling the story in the diner, but we open with Mulder's like little hand, crab-like, skirting across the counter. That was cute. Yeah. That was cute. That was one of those little fun inclusions that just adds to our enjoyment, I think.
I do too. Yeah.
It wouldn't be less an episode or story without it, but it's fun, little Mulder playful moment.
Yeah.
So Scully is doing her reasonable Scully explanation about how his eyes are playing tricks on him, and he has seen all these horror movies and read ghost stories and so forth, and that he hallucinated this vision of the dancing bones reconstructing the bowl. He says that it was, like mechanical or CGI?
Yeah.
So he's all like in his Hollywood world. So she's in her like scientific explanation world.
Right.
He's in his Hollywood world.
Right. And Mulder says, it's not a movie, it's real life. He goes, what's the difference?
Right.
So yeah, I think that was fun. It just puts them each, it highlights each of their perspectives really nicely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And so Fetterman has gotten his flavor. He's gotten his flavor, the flavor he wanted.
Yeah.
And he's off to write his movie.
And Mulder says, don't you want to get to the bottom of the case? No, I've got all I need. Which is really, that's what this episode does. I mean, it's like, let's just get enough and then we can make the ending whatever we want it to be. It doesn't matter what happens because we're going to tell the story the way we want to tell the story. I thought that was I like that we got that from Fetterman. That Mulder's shocked by it but Fetterman's like, no, that's just fine. That's how I do things.
He's not an investigator, right?
Right.
Which is kind of like, on the one hand, it's a little bit shallow. You think, he's just going to make this up, and he has these characters that are kind of cardboard versions of real people and whatnot. But on the other hand, that's what he does. Like, he's a fiction writer. He's not writing documentary.
Right. He's a storyteller.
And
he knows the way to tell a story, and so he's got all he needs about background, and now he can just use those little pieces to tell the story he wants to tell.
Yeah, yeah. So, but Mulder says that truth can be stranger than fiction. And Fetterman says fiction is quicker than truth and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Which It's funny, but it's also kind of a canny thing for him to say, given that, in this whole episode, you have all these forged and constructed elements that come to life and sort of become real, like with the bowl and the zombies and all of that. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I like the way that a lot of the lines seem fun, and then when you see what happens at the end, like when you watch it for, the 85th time,
right?
You can say like, oh, I see how that ties in too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Even the effect of the forged, the fake gospel on some of the people, like it has a real world effect, even though it's fake. So.
Yeah. Well, Fetterman's line, I'm just going to leave you with this. You're crazy for believing what you believe, and you're crazy for not believing what he believes. It's the heart of the show.
Yeah. And again, he gets it in that line.
Yeah.
I think he really gets it.
He does. The script says, it has the ring of truth. It stuns them to silence. And it really does. I mean, they show that very well on screen. It's not just a script note. It's actually what you get from David and Jillian's performance at that moment. And I really like that. Yeah.
And I like, too, after he leaves and Mulder's like, I miss him already. Just really low-key. So Scully, at this point, she's like a little hesitant to tell Mulder. She tells him the story of the Lazarus Bowl. I thought this was a good inclusion for her character. That one thing, this is going to get us a little bit off track, but one thing that I think that the Unnatural didn't do tremendously well was really make it an X-Files, necessarily an X-Files story with Mulder and Scully.
Right.
And because I was like, well, we just have Scully at the beginning, at the end, and it works in the same, some way as a frame story, but I think that this one really integrates her throughout it, and having her tell this story, it's a good character moment, I think, because it's funny, and it gets into her background a little bit without being overly serious, and it brings that sort of religious element into it more strongly, but in kind of a fun, campy way.
Yeah, and it does get where the episode's going with regard to Scully, where her beliefs are going to be coming into question. But
yeah,
so I love it for that. I think that was a really clever way to do it. I love this scene so much because of their interactions. They're friends. They enjoy each other's company. They love to tell each other stories. They like each other a lot, and we don't get to see this friendship very often. Right. We don't get to see downtime for them. And David gave it to us in The Unnatural, and he gave it to us here. And I think that I really appreciate that we get this moment of them just having fun and enjoying each other's company, telling each other stories, laughing, joking with each other. It's very sweet.
I think so, too. I mean, that's my main thing that I was going to probably say at the end of the episode and may repeat, is that, to me, it's very simple. It doesn't have to be more than that. They just enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
And I don't think like you said, I don't think we've gotten to see that before. I don't really think we saw it as much in The Unnatural, and it could have just been the time of that episode and when it occurred and so forth. But I think it's just kind of more almost in a slice of life way in this episode. Mm-hmm. You kind of see them interacting. And I like, though, that they're working on a case, because to me that's primary. It's they are working, they're on their mission, albeit on one that's a little bit off the beaten path even for them. But in what?
Fakakta and Star Trek.
Definitely Fakakta and Star Trek. But they're still able to enjoy each other's company and, like you said, tell each other stories and just have this kind of warm friendship in the midst of it.
Yeah.
As well. And then, she's talking about the nun being called Sister Spooky because the nun would tell them these stories. And I just was like, God, I wish I had gone to a school like this. She's telling about the vial of liquid that was the blood of John the Baptist and the nail that crucified. I mean, it's dark stuff, but it's hilarious at the same time.
You realize she'd be in prison now, don't you? It's such a cute scene. That just where they're bouncing off each other, and she gets ratcheted up because he's joking, and then she gets more into the story. It's really a fun scene.
Yeah. And then when she finishes and she's gone through this whole thing about, because it's almost like she presents it like it's a mystery. What do you think of this? The Lazarus Bowl, and how Jesus, what was it? Lazarus' aunt was in the vicinity when
Lazarus' aunt.
Jesus spoke these words to raise Lazarus from the dead, and the clay grooves of the bowl recorded these words, like music is recorded into vinyl, which is an interesting idea, But
it does it sounds like a story you would hear from Sister Spooky. It doesn't sound like something you would expect to ever come true. But here we go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And does Scully telling the story make it come true?
Right.
In a way? Because there's a little bit of that flavor to it.
A little bit,
as well, if you will.
Yeah.
And I love when Mulder says it's a very cool story coming from you, because I don't think he means it in an insulting way, but just it's unusual for her to be so animated telling a kind of, sort of paranormal, spooky story.
Right,
like
a supernatural kind of thing that he would believe and she would say is ridiculous, but she's like really getting into presenting this to him. So
yeah. And she looks so pleased with herself when he says it's a very cool story. I noticed she's like, That was fun.
Yes.
So Mulder says, to my great delight, that he's going to arrange to have Chuck Burks meet Scully at the office. So it's like, I know we're going to see Chuck Burks again, and I enjoy him.
I do, too.
And then to see, to see if they have Christ's Greatest Hits.
Yeah.
Which, one of my questions for when it's toward the end of this is sort of the reception of some of the religious ideas in this. I don't find it offensive to refer to Christ's Greatest Hits.
I don't.
So I think it's,
I don't either.
Yeah.
The one thing I have to say, we're moving into the scene with Chuck Burks. The scripted version was much longer. That Scully was really wrestling with the possibility that there was some truth to this. And I read in an interview that David said that he wanted Scully's faith to be challenged. That was part of the story. She wonders if maybe Hoffman transcended death and became Christ. She wonders if this Lazarus Bowl is real. She's wondering, well, maybe they're not forgeries. All these things, that's what he wanted to do. And I don't think we really get that. I think, and a lot of things I mentioned were in the script and then were lost in the final cut. So I personally never got the sense that this case was a test of Scully's faith. Because I don't ever think that she really was thinking any of this was tied. I think she always thought there was some sort of explanation that didn't test what she believed. And I think part of it is because the tone of the episode is very, very light, and that's a very weighty theme. So I never got the sense that she was really actually profoundly affected by what was going on.
I don't know that she was profoundly affected. I do see it as like that her faith is tested, but I think it's the lightness of the episode that obscures that to a degree, maybe. Because if you think of Amor Fati, her faith is tested in that, and she's very clear about that at the end, and it's very weighty, but it's not something, I don't know that it's a part of it through that whole episode either, though.
Right.
To me, they're kind of similar, and it is the tone that's different.
Well, and I think
it's also like she's at a different place, I think, in her life or in her experience by this point, too. But I don't know. I kind of think it is, but I think she's maybe more open to that question.
And most of this is, of course, before Amor Fati.
Oh, well, okay.
So, I hesitate
really,
I hesitate to compare it. I guess that's why I don't compare it to the episodes around it, just because we have this huge flashback and we don't know exactly when things are happening. But so I was just trying to look within this episode. And it's the tone. I was thinking, well, maybe it's Gillian's performance, but it's not her. I mean, she's consistent with the entire tone of the entire episode.
There's some moments of reverence, though, I think, that we see that make it not first of all, not trivial, and then also that to me, you can see like, okay, she is thinking about something, but it's just not going to be dealt with in a weighty way in this episode.
Yeah, I think, that makes sense. And I had to say that I read this interview and then watched it again. I'm like, okay. But I always think of this as very light. It never occurred to me that this was actually something Scully was really struggling with.
Right.
But I think part of the point is to show this in a light manner, as contrasted to, like you said, Amor Fati, or with the bones and the reconstruction in Sixth Extinction. So he is playing around with other episodes we've seen this season and saying, well, here's this version of it.
And I think she kind of, we're getting way ahead, but I think she kind of comes to her own answer a little bit maybe in the end as well, whereas she might not have after Amor Fati.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have a lot more to go on that.
We do,
so that's really good. But that's curious about the scene in the office. I need to read that at some point, because I didn't know that was longer.
That
appeals
There's
to me.
a lot more to it. The Hollywood 80s script is available online. Anyone can read it. So that's...
Get it? Okay. Yeah, I don't have that one. In the office, we see Chuck. He's explaining to Scully that everything that exists vibrates. And so he's running his wand over the clay bowl. and talking about the ambient sound being picked up by his machine. And she's listening to the sounds that this bowl is making. And he's very taken with this bowl that's vibrating all of the keys at once. And she says that it was made either by a forger named Micah Hoffman or someone in the vicinity of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's quite the either or there.
Yeah.
But I do take it from that. I don't know. I mean, she says it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I really don't think that it is. I think she's entertaining the idea that that's possible.
Yeah. Because it was in the crypt.
Yeah.
And that has some meaning to her. I mean, relics, even if she's making fun of Sister Spooky, relics are part of her faith and part of her tradition. So, yeah, she's considering it.
I think so, too. I definitely think so. So Mulder goes back. He says he had told Scully he was going to have another audience with Cardinal O'Fallon. So that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And he asks him to read the texts. And I think that this scene is so fascinating. I don't know what you made of it, because it's Mulder and the priest talking about the forged text. But I think everything that Cardinal O'Fallon says and his reactions, all of that to me is just very moving, actually, and really interesting too.
Extremely. I have quite a bit to say about this, actually.
Okay.
First of all, just who O'Fallon is as a character. He's based on the Grand Inquisitor from the Brothers Karamazov. He believes that the evil acts he's done he's committed are justified by the means towards an ultimate good. I thought this was very interesting. David had suggested the scene in Talitha Kumi where CSM is the Grand Inquisitor to Jeremiah Smith's Jesus. So he had suggested that to Chris Carter and then wasn't happy with how it came out. He didn't like how it ultimately was written.
Yeah.
So he thought he would use that character here. So I thought that was interesting. So it ties us back to a previous mythology episode.
Yep.
But also using the character and the way he wanted to do it. As far as that conversation with Mulder and O'Fallon, I love it. I can understand O'Fallon's motivations, but I also love Mulder's reaction to him. And I think what stuck out for me is that this is possibly the only episode with a religious theme where Mulder isn't antagonistic and condescending. He is like almost downright out of character when he says to O'Fallon asked is being made a fool of, a crime. Well, if it were, I'd be serving life. I mean, he's relating, he's empathizing with this character, which is what Mulder would do. Mulder empathizes, but not usually when it comes to religion. So I liked that, and so either Mulder's out of character, or the other religion episodes are out of character, or maybe not. But this is clearly
I think Mulder has developed, though, through his interaction. Well, mostly through his interactions with Scully, but I think he changed over the years quite significantly in how he responds to her religiosity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Orison is not too far in the past, and he was really an ass in that. I mean, as far as religion, it was one of the most offensive reactions I've seen from him. But then we get to I Want to Believe later, and it's very much like this. As an aside,
that needs to be one of our special episodes. You and I need to do host an episode on Mulder and Scully and religion. That'd be fascinating.
Yes, that would be fantastic. We should do that. So anyway, I thought that was interesting that Mulder was being who I would expect Mulder to be, but not who we necessarily see Mulder as in the show when it comes to religious figures.
Okay.
But he seemed very Mulder.
He did. Empathy is the best word, I think, because he's just listening, basically.
Yeah, and he
presenting him with the case, and he tells him these are not real,
Right. And he comes away from this meeting suspecting O'Fallon, but he still can,
which was interesting too.
Yeah, he can still empathize with the man and his figure out what his motivations are. I thought that was really really interesting.
Yeah, I think the text too, what he reads about was that Jesus took his beloved Mary Magdalene in an embrace not of God and woman, but of man and woman. And Jesus said to Mary, "Love the body, for it's all of the soul that our senses can perceive." I think, first of all, in X-Filedom, I think that ties back into some of the things we talked about with the Amor Fati in that episode. Yeah. And then we did that episode on the Last Temptation of Christ, connections to Amor Fati. There's a lot in that, I think, about the physical world versus the spiritual world and, how enmeshed they are versus how separate and so forth. which I think is a really fascinating topic. To me, also, it's part of my sort of non-shipper comes down to that. And just O'Fallon's reactions about, he makes the comment about it exploding a bomb in his heart, which on the surface sounds sort of cheesy since there's been this bomb in the crypt.
Right.
But it's a very, I think, real statement for him. So I take it more with empathy than I would be like, oh God, what a,
Yeah.
Getting the flavor and I don't want to eat your lunch, like all of those references that are kind of funny. I thought that this one really what did have like that weight to it when he talks about his despair, and he didn't want other people to feel the despair that he felt at the Christ in those documents that he thought was real, not being the Christ that he loved,
Yeah.
And that being really spiritually devastating for him.
Yeah. You definitely get the weightiness in this scene, that this is definitely part of the serious aspect of the episode. And I can understand what he's feeling. It's like he's not willing to give up his faith, even though he believes he's found something that contradicts what he believes.
Right.
And that is a bomb going off in his heart. I thought it was really, like you said, it seems like an odd or a silly thing to say, but it fits perfectly with how he's describing his feelings and with us understanding what is going on with him.
And that he didn't destroy, he paid for the text and he didn't destroy them because he thought they were real, even though he hated them. That's so interesting too.
Yeah. He had to hide, he's protecting everyone else from the truth, but he couldn't destroy it because he really believed it was true. If you go down the rabbit hole of that, like had he destroyed them, purchased them and destroyed them, then none of this would have happened. Like the truth would not have come out. And granted, other tragedies came from that, but it would never have come out if they hadn't been found to be forgery. Like if the story hadn't unspooled as it did. Right.
So.
But it would have felt like he was betraying his own faith to destroy them.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, we talked about before, that he's kind of a well-formed character. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned like the humor, and then I think like here just the emotional feeling about religion,
Yeah.
Just it's a strong scene, I think.
Yeah, and both the performance and the writing, the two main scenes we have with this character, and we get a full sense of who he is and what his motivations are. It's really, really well done.
Yeah. We're going to move more into the funnier side of things next.
Yeah.
When Mulder calls Scully, he asks her to horn in, he says, on the autopsy on Michael Hoffman. Because he thinks that Hoffman might have been dead before he died.
Right.
Which is an interesting play on resurrection, but it's that wording. Might have been dead before he died. Yeah. And he thinks that O'Fallon may have retaliated. So like you said, I mean, he does think he's not, swayed necessarily into changing his view of events just because of his empathy for O'Fallon.
Right.
And so Scully is telling Mulder that Chuck Burke said the bull had properties he's never seen before. And she seems to not be skeptical of that. Like she thinks there's something there, is affected by it.
Yeah. And this scene in the script, she asks Mulder, what if they're not forgeries? So you really get the sense that she's reconsidering, or she's not dismissing any part of this case. And she is challenged at that point.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because it seems like it's never brought to a point where she would be challenged by the Gospel of Mary,
right.
The heretical Gospel of Mary, because it's understood from the outset that it's a forgery.
Right. And yet, yeah, so I mean, I understand why when you need to cut down and make the script fit the 44 minutes, that you would lose that, because let's just focus on the bowl. But to me, I mean, the bowl is just, whatever. I mean, to me as a person of faith, that would mean less to me than these documents.
The documents.
Because if it happens to be the bowl that has Jesus's voice, I mean, I don't know that I would believe it could still work just by playing a recording of it. I mean, to me, that seems silly.
That's kind of,
but
it's
the
kind
gospel,
of a yes or no. They're like, hey, that's neat, or it didn't happen that way. Like I could see like a little skepticism and maybe, but I don't think a faith could rise or fall based on that. Whereas it could on scripture.
Because the faith isn't, I mean, what would change about the faith if this bowl exists or not? Nothing. Right? Because you still believe that Jesus has the power to raise the dead. What does it matter if the bowl exists? But the Gospel of Mary Magdalene changes what you base your faith on. So
I guess that's everything about it.
That's why I have trouble finding Scully's crisis of faith if we were just talking about a bowl.
I think it's more than a bowl. I do think that it comes to the Micah Hoffman's claim that he became Christ.
Absolutely.
That we're going to get to in a little bit. But I still to me, like, I even feel like the crux of it would have been the Gospels had there ever been a doubt that those were fake.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Mulder gets a call. Back to our story. Mulder gets a call from Fetterman telling Mulder he's in the movie. And when Mulder finds out that it's Fetterman, he's like, oh, I have to take this call. I noticed that it wasn't because it was like some serious business that he then put Scully off, but because he wants to hear about him being in the movie,
Right.
And that he calls her Sister Spooky. I like that. That was cute.
I love that. That's
playful. Yeah. And so Gary Shandling is going to play Mulder in the movie, and Téa Leoni is playing Scully. And he invites them to L.A. In this scene, I also noticed the contrast. I don't know if this was just an accident of filming. I tend to think nothing in this was accidental, though. But Mulder is driving, and it's pouring down rain where he is. And then Fetterman is, like, all bright and sunshiny. And I didn't know if that was a play on the whole thing about the rain in Vancouver that David had
I don't...
You know what I mean? Like, that whole rainy atmosphere.
It was scripted, I'll tell you that. That it very specifically says, please note it should be raining in Mulder's version and sunny in Fetterman. So...
nice.
It was intentional. Whether it was a dig at Vancouver or not, I don't know. I would tend to think not, because he took a lot of heat for that.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a dig at Vancouver, but maybe a dig at that, supposed controversy.
Or it could just be the contrast between Mulder working a serious case and Fetterman telling a made-up version.
Like
I don't know.
Sunny story. Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. But it was intentional, I can tell you that much.
That's good to know. Scully is going to... So she's autopsying Micah Hoffman. And she says... It's interesting. She says he appears to have died of concussive force injuries. This is at the beginning. And, of course, later she tells Mulder that he had... was it communion wine laced with strychnine in his system, too.
Right, yeah.
She talks about him dying of concussive force injuries, and then she says the heart appears somewhat large.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if that was... I assume that's supposed to have something to do with his presumed... Not his divine nature, but I assumed it had something to do with that.
Yeah, I did too. Context. Yeah.
Okay. And so at this point, when she says that, Micah Hoffman sits up on the examining table and says, I'm going to need that when you're done with it. So I guess that connects back to the heart as well.
Right.
And Scully does say, I don't know, this scene I think is really interesting, because when he rises up, she says, like, oh my God. Which is an exclamation that anybody would say in such an occurrence. But it also is a little bit of, like, her saying, oh my God, like she's subconsciously recognizing his whatever divinity, that divine, yes.
Or she's at least, And is this when he says, I am who I am? Mm-hmm. Okay, because...
She says, who are you? And she says it in that kind of stunned voice, and he says, I am who I am.
And Scully would definitely know that that's a reference to the name of God. So, yeah.
Yep.
I thought that was very interesting.
I do too.
So this scene is really, it shakes Scully. It leaves her shaken.
Right.
Although, like I said, I come down to the tone thing. It's like, it just seems like it took me forever to understand that. It took me several viewings to say, oh, she's shaken by this. She's really thinking maybe he is Christ.
But I don't know that she consciously is at this point.
Yeah.
But there's like some recognition in her that she's saying that. And then when she reaches toward him with the scalpel and he says, like, noli me tangere, baby. And she doesn't stop looking at where he was when she picks up the scalpel. She cuts herself because she's still looking at where he has appeared to her.
Right.
That phrase, the noli me tangere, I'm sure you know this, but it was the phrase spoken to Mary Magdalene, I believe, by Jesus after the resurrection. It means touch me not. And I read an interpretation during one of my other little research projects that there's an idea that Christ is instructing Mary Magdalene not only not to physically touch him, but not to cling to him, that he's not physically linked to people anymore, but linked by faith. So I don't know. I think that it's fascinating that could be said to Scully in this moment by the autopsied Micah Hoffman and potentially have all of those meanings for her, because they all do suit her in a way, I think.
Yeah. And then it ties into the whole Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's
right. But it's not of the physical nature of that relationship.
Layers of brilliance here.
It is blasphemous.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot to that. But it just silly at first.
It seems that whole scene, you could watch that and just think it's a silly scene and not get any of that. And it's still a fun episode. But then when you realize all the meanings of everything Hoffman says, or this vision of Hoffman says, and what it would mean to Scully. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, the possibility that because she sees him here, and then in an upcoming scene, she sees him crucified,
cross,
basically.
yeah.
Like he replaces Jesus on the cross. And they're both religious visions, but they also could just be Scully, well, not just, but they as well could be Scully kind of having a premonition that Hoffman's still alive as well.
Ah, okay. I hadn't put that together, but you're right. And she does have those premonitory
And
tendencies.
it's connected in through this conversion experience that Hoffman will tell her that he's had.
Yeah.
So
one little note about this from the script. When Scully sees Hoffman sit up, it says, Scully nearly pees herself.
I don't know how you act that out, but
She did.
yeah.
Because Cassandra Spender just says it out loud. Oh my gosh, I'm going to pee myself.
Yep, that's true.
But Scully acts it. Because she's just
does.
that good.
And then, of course, Hoffman is back on the table, and Scully is just sort of stunned, I guess.
Yeah. Shaken. Yeah.
Wonders if this has happened.
David had said the reason he chose Scully to have... It made more sense for Scully to be having the visions and the questions because, first of all, her religion, her Christianity is personal to her. Mm-hmm. But also because Mulder is always seeing things and he wants to believe and nothing would shake him. So I thought that was an interesting choice as he was writing it.
I think the visions, too, also tie back into Amor Fati with her seeing Albert Hosteen and seeing just these other things that she, at the end of that episode, doesn't understand.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Following that, Mulder goes to see Scully after the autopsy. And this is when Mulder says, Mano Manischewitz communion wine.
Do you remember those commercials?
The Manischewitz commercials?
Yeah, that was their tagline, Mano Manischewitz.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it rings a bell besides just Mulder saying
right.
Mano Manischewitz. That's hilarious. So he suggests that O'Fallon poison Hoffman and place his body near the explosion to cover the tracks.
Right.
I have a question about this. Doesn't this have to suggest that Hoffman was taking communion?
Yeah, I mean, somehow O'Fallon offered Hoffman wine, whether it was during Mass or whether it was, let's come have a drink with me.
Drink with me and talk about this. Yeah, that's true. I think it's an interesting implication, though, because there's a communion, I think, flavor to it, no matter how it happens.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Right,
because it's the priest serving a parishioner or wine. So there's definitely a communion aspect to it. I was thinking logistically, how could he poison one person's and not, make sure he gets that one and no one else.
Right. That's true.
But yeah, I think it definitely, other than the fact that he calls it communion wine, it does have a communion feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of goes to that whole, like, when they get into the relationships between, like, Jesus and Judas and the betrayer and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know, like the Last Supper. I think they're interesting connections that could be made there, too.
Yeah.
But we only have 25-minute episodes, so.
Yeah.
All right. So Mulder and Scully are going to go. They're going to arrest O'Fallon or get a warrant for his arrest. I really like this scene as well, and I like that it starts with this overhead shot of Mulder and Scully, kind of like the God's eye view of them walking down the aisle in the church.
Yeah.
Or in the, yeah.
Yeah.
And O'Fallon is saying a Eucharist prayer as they walk, which I enjoyed listening to as well, I have to say.
I don't know that I've ever focused in on that. There's another reason to watch it.
I know, right? It's I don't know the prayer, but it's like, you're the one God living in truth. What was it?
Oh, okay. Yes,
you live in unapproachable light. It's interesting. Yeah. I like it, period, but it's also just interesting thematically, given who's reciting it and what the whole episode has been about, I think. It just works well.
Yeah.
So Scully at first wants to afford O'Fallon some dignity and pulls Mulder over to the side. And this is when she sees the crucifix with the crucified Christ on it and kneels. And Mulder kind of steps aside, she's giving her some privacy, I guess.
Yeah.
She crosses herself. And it's after she crosses herself and, like, looks up and she sees Hoffman in Christ's place.
Right.
On the cross. And he says, consummatum est, which is, I think it's, it is finished or it is accomplished.
Yeah. The last words.
Mm-hmm. She looks over at Mulder, but his back is turned to her. And he'd miss it, of course.
So this time Mulder doesn't see. I
Mulder
love
misses
that.
it.
I'd never put that together. That's brilliant.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like he's just, like one turn away, but he missed it.
Oh.
I mean, we're assuming it happened rather than something she saw. But either way, he did not.
Either way. Yeah.
It wasn't for him, I guess.
Because her next question to him. So, okay. Cool.
Yeah, isn't that interesting, though? Mm-hmm. So she looks back at the cross, and then she just sees the Christ figure as it normally was. And she looks entirely perplexed, like a little irritated, to be honest, I thought. And goes over to Mulder, and she's like, let's just get this over with.
Yeah.
Which seems to confuse him, but he goes with it.
Whatever you want.
And then they go to... Yeah, okay. So they arrest O'Fallon just as he's finishing the prayer, and they're saying they're arresting him for the murder of Micah Hoffman. And at that very moment, it's Scully that looks and sees Micah Hoffman amble in the door.
Right.
And kind of grin,
Yeah.
I liked how they presented him.
I did too.
Opening the door and kind of
you're not
aisle and then
can't quite tell who it is because of the sun, the backlighting and everything. And I love that Scully turns to Mulder and says, "Do you see what I see?"
Yes.
Because she's been seeing all these things, and she needs to know if Mulder's seeing it too.
Am I imagining this as well?
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly.
That's great. Yeah. He says, "Yes, I do." And she asks one of them asks if it's Micah Hoffman, and Cardinal O'Fallon says, "Yes, it is."
Yeah.
So it's like she's seeing him in person after having these two visions, I guess, of him.
And she's trying to figure out what's real and what's not.
What's not real. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it would be interesting to see this, because I don't know from whose perspective I see this episode, but it would be interesting to try to watch it and just see what Scully sees.
It would be.
If that would even be possible. So you mentioned earlier that the biggest tonal switch for you was when the bones are reconstructing the bowl. It got into from the serious to the silly. And for me, I feel like this moment going to Skinner's office is more jarring.
It is. It is.
Because I'm kind of focused on this religious mystery and on Scully and then Mulder and that whole story, And then we have this close-up of Skinner chastising Mulder and Scully for misidentification of a corpse and subsequent unrequested autopsy.
Yeah. He seems to forget that there actually was a dead body, even if they identified him wrong,
Right.
There was
This is an interesting thing, though, too. Like, he says there's a dead body, but where's the body? Because they never say who it was.
No.
And there's another point later when that comes up about the body, but it's like, but where is this body?
It's never identified. Yeah.
Was there really another body?
Right. Well, she did an unrequested autopsy. She autopsied someone.
She did.
We just don't know
Or
who.
they say. Like, was it not Micah Hoffman? Like, well, that's the other part of it. It's like, and maybe I'm forgetting something in the episode. It's like, did Micah Hoffman, was it not Micah Hoffman, or was it Micah Hoffman and he came back?
Well, what Mulder says when Skinner's, chastising them, he says, well, there was a bomb that went off and there is a dead body and we at least have forgery and what's the other word? I can't, sorry.
Extortion,
yeah. So so there is a body. Well, they definitely found a body in the crypt.
They did.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe it really was Hoffman who came back
I don't think it's clear.
Yeah.
I don't think it's clear.
We see this body with the Y incision and she pulls the heart out.
Right.
I don't think it really was. I think there was a body, and okay, here's what this interview from David may shed some light on that. He said that he took pride in throwing the case away. He knew that people would want the case solved, but he didn't want to do that on screen because he wanted to move into the story about the movie. So there was always going to be a sense in which the viewers felt cheated, but it was necessary to tell the story the way he wanted to tell it. And he said, if I rationalize it, I would say, here's just another example of storytelling getting in the way of what really happened. But to be honest, it was just expedient.
Yeah.
So I think there really was a body in the crypt. We just have no idea who it was, and we're never going to find that out. We're going to be cheated of that answer.
I just don't believe that they would autopsy somebody based on they found a cell phone on him with his name on it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, maybe it's just that doesn't make sense, but I think all of it is a little ambiguous.
Yeah, for sure. And it's because that's not the story David's trying to tell. He wants to tell the story of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he purposely left us wanting more.
I guess. I like to, I don't know. I like thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's unclear to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's always thrown me. It's one of the things I just like, okay, but I'm still enjoying this episode. I'm having fun. Don't think too deeply. Yeah. Because it was one of those things. It was like, but there was a body, but, there is no
But to me, it's like the question that makes it more interesting as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. So Skinner's yelling at Mulder to leave Hoffman and O'Fallon alone, and Scully to like put her trigger happy scalpel down. So here's another question. So Mulder had initially thought that this was a straightforward case for the ATF, and Skinner made them go anyway. Mm-hmm. So I would say they did their job, and now Skinner is yelling at Mulder for investigating, which doesn't make sense to me.
No, doesn't.
Is that okay?
Mm-mm. No.
All right.
Skinner's anger doesn't. This whole scene with Skinner doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think he would ever say the Marilyn Monroe's purse thing.
No. Don't think so either.
So yeah, this whole, just the fact that she really autopsied a body, what does it matter if it turns out to be someone who they didn't think it was? It was still someone who died in unnatural circumstances, which requires an autopsy. Yeah. If you find a body buried in a crypt, you autopsy it. And she found poison in the blood. I mean, there was a body that was poisoned. She didn't do anything wrong. They just misidentified it. Right. So Skinner's all in this whole movie mode, and he's just being an unreasonable Hollywood type.
That's true. Point. He kind of is being just unreasonable.
And he apologizes later. So, he apologizes later. So we know that he's acting un-Skinner-like, and he knows. He eventually realizes it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, the apology that does help. Yeah. Chuck is still working in their office, and then Mulder and Scully go down to talk to him. They've been given a 4-week leave. Chuck has called in a linguist and discovered that a sound that's layered underneath all the ambient sound coming from the bowl is someone speaking in Aramaic. I kind of like that Chuck brought a linguist in to analyze this too, because it's like whatever his weird areas of specialization are, he does have actual people that are involved in the sciences, that are specialists in the mainstream come in. So I don't know. I like that. I like Chuck.
And I liked that he doesn't magically know everything. That he would have to actually consult with a linguist. Yeah. I think that was a good touch.
That's true. And it seems like we've seen that in other episodes with him. He's not like an expert on everything that comes down the pike from his paranormal wanderings. Right. So, yeah, that's a great point. And so Scully, of course, notes that Aramaic is the language that Christ spoke. And then we have another Beatles reference.
Just hilarious.
I believe we had one earlier. So the translation is in 2 parts. The first part is the Beatles joke. The I am the walrus, Paul is dead, goo goo.
Bearded, cow-like sea beast.
Yeah, the literal translation. The thing I like about this, because again, it's a little too silly for me, but I think it's amusing, the idea that the Beatles and their songs were prefigured by Christ, mostly. If we were to assume that it's his speaking across the whole bowl, the fact that it's predicting the Beatles is pretty funny.
I just assumed it had something to do with Micah Hoffman trying to recreate this, and so he was using
the bowl.
Yeah.
That's
but I'll take the Beatles being prefigured by Christ. I like that one. I'm going to go with that one.
Well, it's one of the. I mean, according to Scully, it's one or the other. It's either a forger and potter named Micah Hoffman, or someone in the vicinity of Jesus Christ. And then the second part is one man commanding another man to rise from the dead. And I think, isn't it Scully that's like Lazarus? And then we switch to Hoffman's studio. Yeah. I kind of liked her ending with the ending with her saying Lazarus. Yeah. So this scene in Hoffman's studio is another. I mean, it's like scene after scene that are just layered and fascinating, I think.
My favorite detail in this scene is that Mulder and Scully are sitting in beanbag chairs.
I knew you were going to say that. I love that too. And I like that you can kind of tell they're not on chairs at the beginning, but you don't quite see it. And then they have a shot where you see part of the beanbag. Yeah, that was good.
Such a funny little throwaway detail that just makes the scene that much better.
It does. And doesn't it make you wonder about the nature of their seating in other places where they've had to go? Because it's not all professional office setup.
Right. Probably sitting in kindergarten chairs at some point in their lives.
Right. We start with Micah Hoffman saying, I am become Jesus Christ. And then he laughs this great hearty laugh.
Yeah. And then Mulder's response, I am become skeptical.
I'm skeptical.
I say that all the time. That is one of my most quoted X-Files lines. I love it. I am become
skeptical.
And I love that it's a change for Mulder. It's clearly, okay, well, Mulder's going to take Scully's role in this case because Scully is becoming the believer. So I like that little switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Hoffman talks about O'Fallon being his divinity professor at Columbia, and I thought this whole description he has of O'Fallon was really interesting, and also could have a couple of different interpretations. He talks about how O'Fallon is a decent man, but he has God in his heart. No, God in his brain, but not in his heart. And he doesn't believe in man's ability to choose to live in freedom.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's almost an either or, and it sort of depends on how Hoffman sees the dual nature of Christ that he's working with.
Yeah.
And if it changed before or after his conversion, or, I don't know. I just think that's very interesting.
It is very interesting. It doesn't seem, the way he believes in God, but not in man's ability to choose to live in freedom. I don't know that belief in man, well, no, I think he's accurately describing O'Fallon. I'm just not sure. When he says he has Christ in the brain, but not in the heart, that's the conflict to me between the believing in God, but not in man. That goes along with, I don't see how that conflicts with Christ in the brain, but not in the heart.
Well, the Christ in the brain, but not in the heart, I could see as it's him saying about O'Fallon. And the thing about not believing in man and man's ability to live in freedom, to choose to live in freedom, is that part of the conflict of believing in God, according to Hoffman? I'm not sure if he's giving a more humanistic interpretation, he believes in God, but he doesn't believe in man's independence to make decisions and so forth outside of God, or is he saying he doesn't believe in man's freedom to choose within the context of believing in God? And it seems to me that I don't know, just from what he says coming up, he has the first interpretation because he's forged this gospel and done all this stuff that has this very physical, earthbound, love the body because it's all of the senses that we can perceive, or all of the, what was it? What was in the plot here? All of the soul that our senses can perceive. But then after he has this conversion experience, he says that the documents were blasphemous.
Right.
And needed to be destroyed. So he's had some other revelation in his thinking. But It's unclear to me when he's explaining this to Mulder and Scully, it seems like it could go with either interpretation.
Yeah.
So Scully asks if Hoffman created a Christ in the forgeries that was more suited to his worldview. And he says yes. And that's when I said, I'd like to point out that Mulder and Scully are seated on beanbag chairs.
Okay.
Right, is when I noticed it at that point.
In the script, they cut this line out, but it's one of the best lines. I love it. Scully asks him if he's talking about creating a Christ in fitting his own worldview, and he goes, sex, drugs, and rock of ages. What a fantastic line. I'm so sorry we cut that.
Oh, yeah. It kind of fits, too. It fits the rest of the script and the themes. And then this next part, when he's talking about before he could write like Christ, he had to become him. And he talks about it almost like he's method acting, is what it sounded like. And he even references an actor playing a part.
Yes, which is just so ties into the theme of this whole episode. And I really loved that line. Hoffman seems like, okay, he's one part of it, and he's never crossed over with Fetterman. But then what he says just brings him back into the Fetterman part of the story, and I liked that. Brings him back.
Oh, in terms of the actor,
like an actor playing becoming a role. And I thought, that because Hoffman and Fetterman never crossed paths within the episode,
right?
But
that's an interesting connection.
But then Hoffman's talking about becoming an actor playing a part, and then we're leading into the movie making.
Right, and we do see that scene, I mean, albeit done in a ridiculous way, when they're trying to figure out these, character points of how Mulder, do you dress to the left or the right, and, wanting to know how to run in the shoes. I mean, that's, sort of that level, the same thing Hoffman's talking about, albeit in a frivolous way.
Right, right.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. So, Hoffman talks about immersing himself in Christ, not just the church and the teachings, but, everything about him and custom of his time and language and so forth. At some point, he talks about how the church didn't go outside to authenticate the gospel because the forgeries were too damning of the church.
Right.
He's talking about becoming Christ, and then he says that something weird came over him in the process of doing this in order to write these forged gospels. And I think it's interesting that Scully offers remorse as the explanation.
Yeah, that was a good...
And then he says, conversion, this lightning bolt that transformed Saul into Paul on the road to Damascus. Then he says he was no longer impersonating Jesus Christ, but he had become him.
Yeah.
Because to me, those are two different things.
Yeah.
Saul becoming Paul was sort of the, epitomizes like the strongest conversion experience, but he didn't claim that he became Jesus.
No.
So I don't know. I think it's interesting because it's all, I mean, did he become Jesus and then, I guess it's not, you can't really analyze that. That's that point. I was going to say and that stayed with him, that he has had this conversion experience to Christianity and believing this, and so he then destroyed the documents, because I think that's the pivotal point, is that the forgeries were blasphemous and he needed to destroy them, so he bombed the crypt.
Right. That's definitely the pivotal moment, but then you have to realize that there's something off about Hoffman. Did he really, if he's claiming he became Jesus Christ, which he has said 3 times now. I mean, that's not conversion. That's, I don't even know what the word would be. But you're right, it's not the same as Saul to Paul. It's not the same as, someone becoming a Christian. He's saying he's Christ. That's not a conversion. That's a delusion.
It's usually, right. But then is it just his way of speaking, he's a new Micah Hoffman, and he is, I don't know.
It could be that it's just his flowery kind of way of presenting himself. But, I mean, the fact that he says, I am become Jesus Christ, and he says to Scully, I am who I am, and
it's and also the 3-time thing, interesting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and why is she seeing him as Christ?
Yeah, she sees him as Christ on the cross.
It's not him doing that, right.
It is possible we are trying to find something that is not actually there.
Well, I mean, there's also whether or not David Duchovny intended that to be there isn't there anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a question that I have at the end about his writing in general.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that, especially when it comes to religious imagery. He knows scripture. He knows because he's studied it as literature or studied it in his education, but he might not attach the same meaning to these words and this knowledge that someone who has faith in that would. So you have to wonder, is he using all these things he knows and creating something greater than he knows he's creating?
Correct. That's what I'm wondering. And I think, too, in some of the interviews, it's almost I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because I don't want to, ascribe to him a motivation that's not there.
Right.
But it seems like he's a little halting in his description of it, or a little more cynical, maybe. I don't know. But then what comes out to me is not necessarily as cynical as what he's saying, it just meant this.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree. I think that there's a light there that he doesn't describe, but I see.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way of putting it. And also, I think, in talking about things that aren't real but then become real, it kind of goes along with the bull having these resurrecting powers. Even the fake zombies and the fake bull at the movie theater, at least in this imagery, have the power to raise the dead,
right?
Even though they're not dead because they were on a movie set, So that's another question that this brings up too. It's even if it's not true, can it be made true?
Right. It can have power anyway because of the way it affects someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or being used to have an effect on people.
Yeah.
However you see that. Yeah. So Hoffman, it seems to me that he realized the error of his previous worldview.
Yeah. I agree.
And then Mulder asked, well, how did Hoffman's cell phone get on the dead man in the crypt?
Which is another clue that there was actually a dead body.
That's when I really started to wonder, again, who is the dead man in the crypt?
Right.
Is there one?
Right.
There?
And then, of course, Hoffman's response gives us nothing. God works in mysterious ways. So, yeah, it's another example of we're just going to throw away the case. It's not what we're focusing on right now. It's
It is, but it makes me think, and so I'm, therefore entertained, I guess. And I like the God works in mysterious ways as the lead-in to Mulder working in mysterious ways in his apartment, singing and reciting. Because he is. He's it's almost like he's reciting. Granted, it's not scripture, but he's lying on his sofa, the opposite of scripture, perhaps. He's lying on his sofa, and he is reciting something as one might go through, an incantation or a recitation of scripture.
Yeah.
Reciting Plan 9 from Outer Space.
And David had said that he tried to give the same quality to Fetterman and O'Fallon that he sees in Ed Wood, which is commitment and passion. And so those 3 characters, assuming that Ed Wood is sort of a character here right now, are all representing the same kind of thing, that they both love what they're doing, they have a passion for what they're doing, they're committed to it, whether it comes out into something beautiful or not.
Right, well, I was going to say, they all are kind of, and Fetterman's not really a failure unless it's just in quality.
Taste.
We're going by. Right, taste. Right.
Well, we don't know. Maybe the movie did well. Scully just hoped it would tank.
It would tank, right. And it's interesting, too, that the movie talks about, like, the dead brought to assimilate life and all of this. Nice thematic coherence, I thought.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, too, like, the whole thing about Mulder talking about the problems of cognition or, like, watching this movie dealing with that reminds me of his closing summation in The War of the Copperphages about being physical beings that can only react rather than ruminate.
Yeah.
It's a very Mulder thing to ponder, I think.
Yeah.
That suited him and it fit the episode. I enjoy this scene between them. Kind of going back to what you said about them, just kind of they're working on the case, but they're spending time together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good conversation. It's amusing. It's warm.
It is.
And
I think finally we get some dialogue that shows that maybe Scully is wrestling with her faith.
Yes.
Do you think it's all possible that Hoffman became Christ and maybe true faith is a form of insanity? And of course he thinks she's making fun of him, but she's actually really pondering this. It's a weighty topic, but the scene is just adorable. There's nothing. It doesn't come across as heavy, even though she's dealing with some heavy thoughts there, because they're very cute. They're enjoying each other's company. They're joking and teasing, and I think that it's a very effective scene, and it is where you finally get the sense that, okay, this has really been affecting Scully personally. Well, it's not finally, but I mean, we've been getting it throughout, but this is like the culmination of it.
Yeah, that she brought it up at all, I think, suggests that it's affecting her.
Yeah.
Even though she's not, as emotional about it as she is at the end of Amor Fati in the doorway scene.
Right, because nothing about this episode is emotionally wrought. It's very, the tone is lightness, but deeper themes. I have to say that I don't think there's anything at all sad about 42 times. I was going to get to that. Times, I don't either. No, that's not sad. What is she talking about?
No. Because I even made a note. It was like, I've seen I Want to Believe more than 42 times. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make me sad.
I've seen this episode at least 42 times.
42 times. I'm sure I have too. It's like I've seen Clue, the movie Clue, more than 42 times, and I'm extremely happy. I also could recite all of that. Just like Mulder.
Yeah, when I turn on the pilot of the X-Files, I can say the whole thing. Uh-huh. Not every single scene, but most of most. Yeah. I don't think that doesn't make me sad at all.
Not at all. I think it's interesting that she reacts that way, though.
Well, maybe just because Ed Wood is so objectively bad. I mean, Plan 9 is objectively bad. I don't know.
But she's not like, well, that's sad. It's like she actually seems to emotionally feel sad in that moment. You've seen that movie 42 times.
Well, there's all you have in your life is reciting Plan 9 from Outer Space.
9 from Outer Space, right? This is what you do every night. I want to go back for a moment to this part of Mulder saying that this is the Ed Wood investigative technique.
Okay.
And how it's a little wordy, I thought, about how it hypnotizes his conscious critical mind, and then basically he has these or he says, like, what was it, like frees up his right brain to make a socio-poetic leap. So basically he's like having these subconscious realizations of these patterns among these people, I guess. Uh-huh. And comparing them to Hoffman's Jesus to O'Fallon's Judas, and then Hoffman's Jesus to O'Fallon's Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, which we have mentioned briefly already. And then Hoffman's Jesus to O'Fallon's St. Paul. All of which have a different twist, but very interesting, I think, idea that Mulder's probably thinking about. Mm-hmm. But the part that I love the best is when Scully jumps in with, how about Hoffman's Roadrunner to O'Fallon's Wile E. Coyote? Because it sounds like really silly, and you can either appreciate it or roll your eyes at it as a silly comment that Scully's making, but I kind of think she's really quick and gets it.
Yeah. And plus,
think about
Wile E. Coyote is always trying to blow up the Roadrunner.
Yes, but it's like he can never... the Roadrunner always evades him. The Roadrunner also is always happy. Like, you never see that the Roadrunner is depressed that he's being pursued by a Wile E. Coyote.
Right.
Or thinks that he's going to, no, this time he's going to get me. Like,
never worried
he
about
almost
it.
seems like Micah Hoffman, like, smiling.
Yeah.
But it is like that thing that's always beyond our grasp, I think.
Yeah.
So there's that interpretation, too. If you make it more serious, that this idea that they're talking about, like, whether it's Hoffman or Jesus, that these things are always a little bit past comprehension. Mm-hmm. Just like the Roadrunner being always just out of the grasp of Wile E. Coyote.
Yep. Yeah, Scully did get that really quickly.
Yes.
Mulder's been lying there pondering it, and Scully just got it just like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And was able to make like such a leap off to these cartoon characters.
Yeah.
You know, they really got it all in one fell swoop. I don't know. I love that.
That was impressive. Yeah.
She's brilliant. So that's probably that part of it. I love the whole scene, but that's my favorite part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so then in the movie, they take a moment, they're watching Plan 9 from Outer Space, and they're talking about Hollywood and San Fernando and reports of saucers. It really is just the perfect movie for Mulder to be watching. And he calls their suspension a 4-week probation vacation, which I think is a great way to look at that. And he wants them to go to L.A. to take Wade and Fetterman up on their offer to see the movie being filmed. It's just, they're going to have a fun time.
Yep.
I noticed when they walk on the set in Hollywood, Mulder kind of looks giddy just from the beginning, and he seems to be that way throughout. But you can almost see him like on his toes a little bit, you know, just seems excited to be on the movie set.
Right. She's a little more cautious.
And so Fetterman introduces them to their movie counterparts, Téa Leoni and Gary Shandling.
Even before that, when Fetterman greets them, he kisses Mulder and shakes Scully's hand.
Right? Yeah, that was a funny detail.
It's so silly.
It was. I like him shaking Scully's little hand, though. I don't know.
I do too. That's just the whole bit was hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. And I think it's funny now. I think it was even funnier in 2000.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, I kind of, on this next part, we've got the back and forth of meeting each other, which to me, again, like it's a little bit much.
I thought so too. But whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's
cute.
Yeah. And I do like the part of Téa Leoni asking Scully to show her how to run in heels.
Gosh.
She's so earnest about it.
All the little details in this scene, you know, they go over, and first of all, we see Gillian Anderson walk off and Arlene Pileggi run on. I mean, you can see the switch. I love the fact that.
Although I guess maybe that was on purpose. Like, you have to question everything in this episode. So it's like, they just didn't have her turn the right way. But maybe that's intentional.
Maybe it was intentional. And then I love the fact that after one or two passes, Téa is over it, and she's on the phone, not even paying attention, and Scully's still running back and forth.
She's still doing her best. Yep.
And then David's dog, Blue, walks through the scene, and I love that. Right. Just so many little things about that were hilarious. But
it's like, how many stories are we telling right now at the same time?
Right.
You know? At least 3.
Yeah, that's why I like the fact that we actually see Arlene take her place. It's like it's just one more level of storytelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm appreciating this much more now.
Yeah. I like that. But I have to say, I watched this episode several times before I even caught on. Well, the switch. It took me a while to catch that. But then before I caught on that, Téa's not even watching her run. She's on the phone. I mean, it took me. I didn't even notice that at first. So there's just so much more is revealed each time you watch it. Mm-hmm. And from the time I had originally seen it to when I started rewatching, the only thing I remembered about that scene was David and Gary talking. I had forgotten the Scully running back and forth as David and Gary are talking. So, you know, and that was, there was a long time that I'd seen it. I probably noticed it the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole bit is just so many layers of funny and good.
Yeah. This is how, because I've always thought the running part was funny. I think I probably noticed that early on, because the Mulder and Mulder talking conversation to me is more, I don't know, like I can kind of throw that away more easily and watch the background part.
See, I find their conversation hilarious. And what I love is that it's not quite that funny in the script. It's just one line. I mean, Gary says, "Do you dress to the left or the right?" He says, "Left."
Yeah.
And Gary looks off disgusted and walks away. But when you put David Duchovny and Gary Shandling in a scene together, they're going to make it bigger and better and funnier. Mm-hmm. And so I like that just on a whatever level you would call that. It's like a human level. It's like the two of them, friends and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think there's more and more to appreciate about it. But it's the running part that gets me the most.
And this scene, I tried to find as much information as I could, but apparently there's a lot of people, of the extras in this scene were production staff from the X-Files.
I have read that.
So the craft service person who they talked to because of the shoulder, Téa Leoni's shoulder, was actually the X-Files craft service person.
That's cool.
Yeah. supposedly David's brother Daniel is one of the people on set. Mm-hmm. The assistant director, who's referred to in the script as Sugar Bear, in quotes. it has some. I spent a lot of hours last night trying to figure out what Sugar Bear means, what the inside joke is there, but I couldn't. I found some questionable references on the internet that I wouldn't suggest people look at.
That's what I was afraid. So I noticed that was the name. I was like, I'm just gonna let that one pass me by.
So anyway, I like that they did that they included. And then the vegetarian zombie was also related to the production staff somehow, and I could. Okay. So anyway.
I think I did read that the zombie was like somebody fairly high up or involved in the.
I saw it in IMDb in a couple of places. It's Tim Rowe was the name, but then another article said that it was Bill Rowe, who was the director of photography. So then I thought, well, maybe they're related, Tim and Bill, or maybe it's one person and one of the articles was wrong and one was right. I don't know. Yeah. So I think that the vegetarian zombie was a production person.
Also a production person. Okay. And then, of course, there's there's the Kim Manners spoof character that tells them to kick it in the arse.
Yes. I like that.
Yeah. Throughout, Mulder and Scully seem kind of, not stunned, like it's not dramatic, but they're kind of like wide-eyed, and Mulder still looks amused, though.
As they're watching all this happen, they're like in shock almost. Mm-hmm. And the whole discussion about the turkey and the tofurkey and
I know. And what was it, like the zombie or the people are made of turkey? Isn't that what one of them yells one of the zombies yells as he runs off the screen? It's something like that. It's some sort of like play on zombies, but it's like the people are made of turkey.
Okay.
Or something to that effect. It's the last line. I've maybe only noticed it this past time watching it, but and I had the subtitles on.
Okay.
The zombie runs off and he's screaming, "The people are made of turkey."
Oh, okay. Yes.
Instead of like something else.
Right. And
being made of people. Right. Yeah. Funny stuff. Continue on with a little bit of like the light absurd in the bathtub scene at the Beverly Ernesto Hotel. Scully has her glass of red wine. I find this scene appealing because I like that they're all relaxing in the bathtub, drinking their beverages.
Right.
Mulder he says he's at the computer.
Right.
He's got a beer and he's in the bathtub, and she says she's packing and getting ready for their trip back to DC tomorrow. So it's just this kind of bland conversation at first, until Mulder talks about thinking about so he's thinking again, basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the whole point of this. He's thinking again about Lazarus, Ed Wood, and the tofurkey eating zombies. The tofurkey, that's another thing that is an imitation. Like tofurkey isn't a real meat that turned out to be real. So another part of that theme that I thought was kind of clever.
Yeah.
And he wants to know why zombies always want to hurt the living. And so Scully goes into this explanation about ghosts and zombies are just projections of our own repressed cannibalistic and sexual fears. It's a little bit like her explanation in How the Ghost Stole Christmas about how we like project ourselves onto these ghosts and their shabby outfits and so forth, I thought too,
Yeah.
So Mulder has his theory that zombies are basically like working their way up a hierarchy of satisfaction when they come back from the dead.
Right.
So they're going to kill and eat and then dance and make love. I thought it was a fun conversation.
It was. It was really cute, and it's a kind of, I mean, we get banter from Mulder and Scully in the series, but we don't get many conversations like this where they're just, I mean, when he says exactly, and he just looks they're just enjoying this conversation, and it's really sweet. I like knowing that they are such good friends.
Yeah.
Even though they won't admit that they're taking bubble baths.
I know. And if they didn't know each other, I would say it's flirty, but I think it's just friendly.
I think it's definitely friendly. Yeah, it's just, they are like each other's person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's fun.
I do too. And so Mulder gets this call from Skinner. He says he's at the computer. This is really, it's my favorite Skinner part by far in the entire episode. Yes. And Skinner's just like, I'm taking a bubble bath. And Skinner also, it looks to me like Skinner is taking up the entire tub. Like he barely fits in, whereas Mulder and Scully are normally placed. But he's hulking, taking up the entire tub, whether they filmed it that way or if it's just Rich Pileggi is that way. But he's also, it looks like he's eating fruit and he's drinking champagne while he's in there too.
Yeah, he's not going to hide that at all. He's going to tell Mulder, I'm taking a bubble bath.
I'm taking a bubble bath. And then Mulder, oh god, I'm sure you're laughing at the same thing.
Yeah.
Like when Mulder is like, oh, could you hold on, and like tells Scully like Skinner's calling from a bubble
No,
bath,
he's a
and it's
skin
still
man.
him.
I love it.
Yeah, Skin Man's calling from a bubble bath. Like he just has to share it with her right away.
Right.
You know, this gossipy thing while they're both in bubble baths. And it's still Skinner. But the funniest part to me is that Mulder's like, oh, sorry. Okay, could you hold on a second? Like, he's going to do it again. Like, right away. He messed up the first time. Skinner knows full well what's going to happen now.
Skinner knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and Mulder's like, hold on. That's so fun.
Yeah.
I just think it's fun.
Yeah, very, very
like,
fun comic timing there.
Yeah, and Mulder's embarrassed, but as per usual, he's not embarrassed enough to not keep doing the same thing again.
Right.
And they talk about Skinner having gone Hollywood. And then I thought it was cute that Scully teased Mulder that Taylor has a crush on him and that Chamberlain likes him a bit too. It's a little insider humor oriented, but I think it's funny the way that Scully does it. So whatever.
Yeah, it's like, since it's there, let's have this cute little moment from Scully. So that's my feeling on it.
They could have left that out and it would have been just fine, but, whatever.
Yeah.
And her expression when she says Chamberlain likes you a bit too, and she's taking the sip of wine and kind of raising her eyebrows, I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Her expression's always great.
Yeah.
It's now 16 months later, so it's 18 months earlier. Now we're back to 16 months after that.
Because it took
at
two
the premiere
months to investigate the case, apparently. Mm-hmm. That's my feeling. Anyway.
18.
Go back
Right,
18, and then we're spending 2 months in the past, and then we jump forward another 16 months.
16 months to the
bring us back
premiere
to the
where we
premiere.
started the entire thing.
Right.
Which, I guess that makes sense.
Sure.
Time-wise.
Sure.
Yeah. They start, rather than going through the whole audience, the focus is on Mulder and Scully's kind of disturbed reactions to the movie. There's a moment when they're filming behind their heads, and Mulder kind of drops his head towards hers, and she does the same thing, and they're both just like, ugh, I really like that for some reason. And then you see through that, like, their counterparts just slobbering on each other and making out on screen, and Mulder and Scully are just like looking at each other, And then they get to the line of "I'm in love with assistant director Walter Skinner." At this point, I wrote, Fetterman must be a failed fanfic writer. And I don't know if that's part of what they're sending up, but that's what occurred to me at this point.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, there are certainly fanfic writers who ship Skinner and Scully.
Or just write this, that type of thing.
Or write that type of thing.
In this particular style, maybe.
Yeah. I did appreciate that we got that tie-in from the past with Fetterman and Scully helping out Skinner. I mean, he clearly had been thinking along those lines. And then he was grilling Mulder about the nature of their relationship. He's processing how he's going to use this in his movie. And I like that we saw that play out in the final product. I thought that was well done, that way it tied through.
Yeah. And so Mulder, again, tells Scully he can't take it anymore. She tells him to sit down. And I think somebody else in the theater yelled, sit down. Somebody from the back. I noticed that the last time I watched it. And then you also have this audience that's just laughing hysterically at these dumb jokes about the flashlight and so forth.
Right.
So Mulder leaves. And then Scully and Skinner have that exchange. And Skinner's date is kissing on him.
This is how David made it up to Mitch for not having a bigger part. It was like he gave him a girlfriend at the...
A girl.
A girl.
Yeah.
Gave Skinner a girl.
Right. I think the bathtub scene makes up for it.
Oh, the bathtub scene was...
Skinner won that one, for sure.
Absolutely.
So we have the final scene here. Mulder and Scully talking on the movie set. And Mulder's eating popcorn from a Lazarus bowl. We don't know how long he's been out there, because she says she's been looking everywhere for him.
Yeah.
So he must have just been sitting there by himself for a little while.
Sulking, as he does. Yeah.
And thinking.
Yeah.
And he says, they got it so wrong, Scully.
Which can be taken in a lot of ways.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that now?
Okay. I mean, well...
I don't want to hamper your shipper enthusiasm. If you have things that you need to get out.
I have thought about this a lot. Like I was talking about earlier, the placement of this episode within the other things that are happening in this season. And specifically with his reaction to seeing the movie and being so upset by it. And I was thinking, if this happened before All Things, he would be horrified that something that they haven't done together is now put on screen and people are misinterpreting it. and misinterpreting what their relationship is they're, they haven't gotten to this point, and yet here they are kissing on the screen, but then she's in love with Skinner. But I think it's more likely for me that this is after all things. They've all already become intimate. And then suddenly this is thrown up on the screen for people to judge and dissect and then be made a joke of. And he's just really upset that this is something that was very personal to them is now being thrown out for everyone to look at and laugh at, and that's not even what it's like between them. They really, when Mulder in the movie says, "I know we treat each other like we're equal," it's very condescending, like, I act
like
like
an
you're
announcement.
Yeah. And it's like maybe we're not equal, but we act like we are, kind of thing. It's awful. It's really awful, and
yes.
And so I would understand why Mulder would be upset with that, because it's like he doesn't want to make light of this relationship with Scully. It's the most important thing in his life is how they are together. Whether you believe that they're romantic or not, that relationship is important. And here they're throwing it out on stage and making it look ridiculous. Not on stage, right. On screen. So I think that when he's saying they got it all wrong, he is talking about not only the Hoffman O'Fallon stuff, he's talking about the Mulder-Scully relationship. Like, nothing we saw on that screen has anything to do with who they really are.
Right.
Yeah. So that is my shipper lecture of the day.
Okay. I mean, you can have more if you need to. I'll just have to have,
maybe when we get a little further, I might have a little more to say.
All right. No, I agree with that entirely. But I think that's like what he's going to talk about in a minute, about like these complicated, beautiful flawed characters.
Yeah.
But I think he's talking about them as well,
Yeah.
But to me, it's number one thing is what you said. Like, that is not their nature, whatever they are or aren't doing, they're just... There's not really an interpretation or some sort of like screenwriter that can come and be like, oh, this is what they are,
Yeah.
And to me, that fits better in the context as, somewhat fictional characters, at least, like not entirely to us, but,
right.
Reality, if you're going to be reality bound, then they are fictional characters. It works, I think, better for them to not be romantically involved, at least at this point. You can see like later on, I mean, it's a whole, other episode, but later on in their later years or whatever, but I just think it stands out more if either you don't know or that's just not what it is. So they have this time together, and the time together is like the time they have together, and that's kind of just what you get to see. But I think that they got it all wrong, like what you were saying about it. Because that's just the surface. Like, whatever that is in either interpretation, it's just like throwing it out, this kind of cheap interpretation of them.
Yeah.
And so Mulder is, I think what you said is right. He is resisting the crappy quality of the movie, of course, but also this interpretation of them that he's taking so seriously because it's so important, and yet here somebody has done this cheap thing with it.
Yeah, and it's all will they, won't they, did they, didn't they? And
right, exactly. Right. That's it. And that's what I feel like
what
David...
the movie is showing, when their relationship is so much more important than that.
Right. Then the series of questions, and the series of questions that Fetterman's asking, like, oh, is she more than your partner? And like all of this stuff. And like, when and where, and didn't they? Like, all of that, I think, is part of, what Mulder's is said about. And I would assume in the writing of it that it's what's being mocked a little bit by David Duchovny's writing of it. It's just like, that's not the whole relationship,
See, I think David Duchovny writes as someone who believes Mulder and Scully are everything to each other. And I just don't know when he wrote Hollywood AD. And
I can see him...
how much of all things had been written at the time he wrote Hollywood AD.
Do you think, though, that he takes... See, I can't see that he takes things that don't happen in an episode as canon, like this interpretation or whatever, from all things. I don't know that he's looking into what else happened underneath.
It clearly happened in all things, Marlene.
And the implications thereof. But I don't know. Like, do you know what I mean, though? I don't know that he's because of this. And I think he would look at like the straight story that's told on the screen and not violate that in terms of the storyline or the canon. But I don't know that he's... I don't know. That's a question for him, I guess.
That would be a question for him. But I don't think he would deny that they had sex in all things. I think he would watch that episode start to finish and say it's clear what happened there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he was addressing that, because I don't think he necessarily, as he was writing Hollywood AD, I mean, Gillian didn't even add the start and end to all things until later. So it's like, I don't know who wrote what when, and clearly it hadn't been most likely all things hadn't even been filmed at the time he was writing Hollywood AD. So I don't think he's referencing that as for us to put together based on when it aired. So I don't know. It's ambiguous enough that you could watch Hollywood AD and this ending to it and not know where they are in their relationship. Other than
I think that's it, though. It's like it is as it is in that moment.
I would lay money that if you asked David Duchovny if Mulder and Scully had sex in season 7, he would say yes.
I don't want to hear about it.
We can edit that all out. You don't have to worry about it.
I don't want to cut out your words. It's just like,
I'm sorry.
Fallon,
I know that bothers you.
Religious texts. I don't know. It doesn't bother me with any other character or person on the whole planet except Mulder and Scully.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm. I am perfectly happy with the idea that they are the most important people in each other's lives. That is the relationship for them, and we don't need to dissect it any further. Because I think that's what comes across. Yes,
that's what I'm saying. I think that's why. Yes, that's what I find appealing about it is that what's shown is that that's the most important thing, and it's not up to other people to analyze or deconstruct or put their ideas on it.
Scully getting dressed in Mulder's bathroom and walking past a naked Mulder in his bed, it just seems pretty straightforward to me.
I mean, if that is, we have to cut this part out because we're going way off on all things. But if that is actually what happened and not just like a what if scenario.
Okay, but that's reading something that's not there, right? If you're saying that's a what if scenario, there's nothing nothing else.
Well, it's like the paths you choose in life, and then that could have been one of them.
But this is where she moved forward to.
I like the idea. I do like the conversation on the couch when they're talking about other choices you could have made in life.
I do too.
That would lead you. And
I like the scenes that Mulder and Scully have together throughout the episode.
So then Scully follows up on the case, and she says she received a page from the Washington Bureau, and Micah Hoffman was murdered in his own home by Cardinal O'Fallon, who hanged himself. I didn't quite see the motive for that at this point. I probably have to watch this episode yet again for this, because I just don't see Cardinal O'Fallon then murdering Micah Hoffman, unless it was something that Micah Hoffman represented something that Cardinal O'Fallon couldn't understand spiritually. But I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
No, it doesn't particularly make sense to me, although maybe he's just still struggling with the fact that he was duped, and he's Hoffman was to blame for that, and all the bad choices that he made, all the pain that he'd been through thinking that this was an actual gospel, that that it was all Michael Hoffman's fault, so it was more of a crime of passion. Or revenge. I don't know. So I think maybe his interactions with Hoffman had unhinged him in some way, and so I could see the murder from that respect, and then killed himself because he had just murdered someone.
Right. It's kind of like an act of unbelief, I guess, if you look at it that way.
Yeah,
maybe it's interesting. And Mulder says it's Jesus and Judas.
Yeah,
and betrayal. When Scully says it's all over and Mulder says it's just beginning, and I guess he's talking about because the story is being told in this movie this way, because I don't quite understand how else he would mean that it's just beginning, but he talks about how they're complicated, flawed, beautiful people. And that's when I made a note, is he really talking about himself and Scully?
Yeah. I think that has to be what he's talking about. It's just beginning. The story is just now being told because the movie is about to come out, or it's just being premiered. So that's just the beginning. And he is worried about how these beautiful, flawed, complicated people are going to be perceived because of this movie. So that's what's beginning.
And it's such an earnest concern, and he talks about the O'Fallon character being listed as a cigarette-smoking pontiff.
How ridiculous is that? Yeah.
I thought it was, It's like a several-layer ridiculous comment.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe it's David Duchovny commenting on how the X-Files characters are, being reduced by their own show or something. So, he's kind of getting morose about how they'll be remembered. And Scully just sort of pragmatically suggests that the movie's going to tank.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that the dead people are going to be misremembered. And he's upset about the oversimplification and trivialization by Hollywood. It's a fun twist, I think. He says they'll become as plastic and meaningless as the plastic Lazarus bowl. given that it's the plastic Lazarus bolt that's about to become the
catalyst.
instrument for the... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What did you think about this part? Because Scully, she's getting into a better mood throughout this, even as Mulder is still a little depressive, And she's talking about how they can adopt the same attitude of people not caring what other people think of them, which I liked. I liked that aspect of her. When she gets kind of giggly about the bureau credit card that Skinner gave them.
Okay, I think she's just... They have an ending to their case, right? And they're in Hollywood, and they just saw a movie premiere, and let's just put all the problems behind us and have a good time. We can go out and have some fun now. And she's really laughing at Skinner, who was so tickled by the movie. And the fact that it just showed her having a crush on Skinner in the movie, and Skinner loving that part. I think it's... Maybe she's just like, I don't want to get too deeply in there. Let's go have a drink or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like how giddy she gets about the idea of using the bureau credit card. And it's sort of like, we have permission to do this. We're not breaking the rules, so we can just go have fun.
That's true.
I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I do like the idea that it's so in character for him to be morose and overthinking and for her to be pragmatic and like, well, no, here's what we know. This is the answer. It's over. And then let's go have some fun. I just think that's very cute.
I remember when this first came on, I thought that it was like a little bit of Gillian Anderson breaking through in the character, like laugh and so forth, and I didn't like that. In watching it over the years, I kind of like it now because I think it's this lighter side that Scully has had after kind of the darker aspects of her character earlier this season. Yeah. So I tend to agree with what you said more and more as the years go by.
Someone commented on Twitter last night. I had tweeted out that I was doing podcast prep for this episode and with a picture of this scene, and someone said, I love that we can hear Gillian's laugh from Scully. And I thought that was interesting because I imagine some people think that's a flaw, because this doesn't look like Mulder and Scully, it looks like David and Gillian. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like a flaw to me, because I do think that while the show focuses on their work, that these two are still friends, and they have funny, friendly conversations, and they probably giggle in each other's presence often, and or occasionally, and we just get to see it this time. So I don't have a problem with that.
I think too, going way back to the beginning of this conversation, since it is something that was at the end of season 7, and they didn't know if they were wrapping things up, it's kind of a fun, sweet ending, or would have been for the actors as well as the characters to have that moment. Yeah,
I like it. And the fact that she can sort of jolly him out of his bad mood, I think is really sweet. And that might be why she's being extra giggly, is because she's trying to get him to lighten up a bit. So it works for me. I'm happy with it.
And it works too, because as they jog off to go out for their evening on the town with the credit card, I mean, he definitely seems lighter,
Yeah, the whole... I have a confession. I'm in love with associate producer Walter Skinner. He says, me too.
Me too.
So cute.
It was. Cute. That really was. That was. And then I do like at that moment that they hold hands, because I think it's sweet, but it's also like, again, like they just enjoy each other's company, and it's something that they used to do more like out of comfort or some trauma had happened or whatever, and they're just enjoying being together in whatever context.
It's a callback to who Mulder and Scully have always been. We've seen them hold hands before, but like you said, in pain, in comfort, in sorrow, but here they're just having fun. It's just very sweet. Yeah.
I like too that he puts the plastic bowl on the head of the angel, I guess, or whatever the statue is. Right. And you can kind of hear the branch scratching. And then you see I love that you see at some point their shadow as they walk off, across the green screen.
Yeah.
Like the way that was filmed.
Yeah.
And then the needle hitting in the vinyl.
Right.
The branch scratching on there. Which was a little bit, again, like going back to the Sixth Extinction and so forth, like the similarity to the spaceship and the symbols on the ship and the rubbings and so forth, which I think were also supposed to be fake, or someone had accused those of being fake, and yet they had this actual power. So I like all those tie-ins and the way that it works out. And then we have the ghost dance.
The zombies.
The split second Mulder and Scully are off the screen. They all rise from their fake graves.
I like...
And do the I guess it's like the cha-cha or a tango.
It's a tango, yeah. I think this was a quote from David or a description from David. It said, Mulder and Scully think they know how the story ends. They have the ending they need. So they know what happened to Fallon and Hoffman. And so they go out and have some fun. But they underestimate the power of Hollywood. Whoever gets to tell the story wins. So, so the zombies get the last word. They're brought to life by a fake wind, moving a fake branch on a fake bowl in a fake graveyard, which can raise the dead, even dead people who aren't really there, and make them dance and show us what life is really all about. Whoa. Which he admits, he says it makes poetic sense. It doesn't make any logical sense that these zombies who aren't even zombies would be brought to life by something that's not even real, but it makes poetic sense in the story he's telling, which was his justification for the illogical moments in the unnatural also. So I like that. I like knowing that this is poetry.
It does seem that way. I think it connects as a whole story, though. I mean, I think even like the plotting, you go from one scene to the next in a reasonable way, even if some of the elements within those are definitely more poetic.
Yeah.
So.
I have never had a problem. Okay, this is something you might know about me, but I love singing and dancing in shows that seem completely out of place. So this ending has always made me very happy. I have never had a problem with that, but I understand that some X-Files viewers don't think that it fits, but I don't need it to fit. I just need it to be there. So
I think it fits as well. I think it fits what Mulder and Scully have been talking about and like their realizations at the end. I guess if I had to criticize it, I would say it does go on a bit long, but it doesn't really bother me. It's kind of like the zombies get their own time at the end.
Yeah. So. It's fun music, so why not?
Right, yeah, exactly. That's true. Did you have any other thoughts that we did not cover or that you want to kind of go back and revisit?
No, I think we got everything I had in my notes.
I mean, there's so much. We could go on forever, I'm sure, about some of these themes of like the transformation and conversion and whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of that writing that he does that's more poetic, is it's, you can kind of keep building out.
Right.
Keep digging into the onion.
Keep finding more meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, even the title, we didn't really get to that. I mean, that's kind of simple, but like multi-layered. So you've got Hollywood AD, assistant director, and then like Hollywood in the year of our Lord. So I thought that was kind of David Duchovny clever.
Yeah. Yes.
Twist with more to it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's go ahead through the mailbag, and then if you think of anything else that you want to add, then we can do that. Okay. Tony Black says, there is no world in which this episode, A, should work, and B, they should be able to get away with it. And yet they do on both counts with real chutzpah. Definitely my favorite of David Duchovny's writing directing efforts, and filled with all of the elements he finds interesting. Religious philosophy, counterculture, ancient mysticism, and of course, irreverent comedy. It's easy to forget all those touches that are the stronger aspects. The Lazarus Bowl, Micah Hoffman, over the obvious crowd-pleasing beats like the bubble bath and all of the metatastic X-Files pastiche elements and cameos, etc. In short, it's not just huge fun, but it's smarter than people might also remember. As Mulder is of Téa Leoni, I'm a big fan.
That's a good comment. I like that.
I think it's a great comment. Yeah. It really does sum it up.
Yeah.
It's clap like.
It shouldn't work, but it does. You just have fun watching it.
Yeah. So Renee, and I'm sorry for how I'm going to botch this last name, Lariviere, says, I love this episode. David Duchovny's humor works so well within the X-Files.
I think that's so true. I mean, a lot of Mulder's funny one-liners throughout the series are David Duchovny's ad-libs. So his humor definitely has a place in this series, and I like when we get concentrated doses of it from his episodes.
I do too. And when I read this comment, I was thinking about the other writers that have tended to do humor more than like a line or so here in a serious episode. And because I don't think all of it works, or maybe all of it's just not the thing that I like. But I would say that David Duchovny is definitely one of the ones that writes humor in a way that, even though it's off the beaten path, it really works for the show and incorporates all of the elements of the show into it. Andrew Levitt says, despite the quirky ending, Hollywood AD is both a fun and interesting episode. The concept of the Lazarus Bowl and the fake versus real artifacts is intriguing enough to drive the serious sections of the episode, and I wanted more about them. The concept of an X-Files case as Hollywood movie is funny, and while I'm glad it doesn't take up too much of the episode, there's some cringeworthy, whimsical moments toward the end I could do without. That's an interesting sentence. An interesting idea, too. While Hollywood AD is not a favorite of mine, it's still an entertaining, if average, viewing experience. I don't know that I would consider it average viewing experience.
Yeah, for me, it's
I
definitely
it's
above.
heightened.
I do too.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about when he said he wanted more of the serious story, and that was exactly what David wanted people to feel. So,
yeah,
mission accomplished, right?
right. I do like what he says, especially about the concept of the Lazarus Bowl and the fake versus real artifacts being intriguing to drive the serious sections.
Yeah.
Because I think that's, the fake versus real artifacts to me is a big part of the weight of it.
It is.
And then Natalie says, Scully, and in parentheses she has Arlene, running up and down in the background, showing Taya Leone how to run in heels while she isn't even watching is totally hilarious.
It is.
Which we've already talked about. But I feel like that's a good, closing mailbag comment.
Yeah, I like that.
It's just a great image. It's one of the, I think, most unique episodes in the series, but it is kind of like one of those that's culminating enough that I could see that being one of the final episodes, if not the final one, maybe, had they decided to end it in season 7.
I had not ever really considered it from that perspective, but I think you're right, that this would be a nice way to usher out the series. Not the final, but getting there. I think you're right.
That's all for us. Cathy, where can people find you on social media?
I am on Twitter all the time, tweeting about the X-Files. I'm Catherine Glins 2, or Cathy G. And I'm occasionally on the Facebook basement group for the X-Cast.
Okay. And I am Marlene Stemme on Twitter and on Facebook, where we have our X-Cast basement group of people discussing the show. So find us over there. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Cathy, for the long and very interesting conversation. And until next time, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
So you know how you were both talking about the attractive women and how you spotted a particular one that you liked, etc., etc. Would you like to know what I put in my notes?
Go on then.
Yeah. Love the Cuban heels.
They're very nice heels, and the fact he mentions in the behind the scenes later on there, was it a size too small?
Yes.
Yeah. Totally worth it for Cuban heels. For me, I'm 6'1", which is ever so slightly above average. If I get a pair of Cubans, I'm 6'3", and I look like a god. Yeah. I love Cuban heels.
Pick a disc.
The steps formula at that time was player things. If there's another verse, the fail get it. If they want a little bridge or something like that, they might give it to H or Lisa possibly. But all the hook and everything else would have been player.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I noticed as well, I think Lisa has a lot more kind of solo stuff or solo verses in this album, I think, from what I remember. As well. So the balance is slowly getting more into things. I mean, but it's something that usually happens in all kind of girl/boy groups.
Frame to frame.
My first trip to the cinema to see a Bond film was Die Another Day.
The first one I saw in the cinema was The World Is Not Enough. I tried to get into Tomorrow Never Dies. I was just too young, and we got rumbled in the queue, and I was absolutely devastated. She went, "Oh, are you 12 years old?" There was a woman in the queue. I thought, I can't remember if it was the woman behind the box office or not. She basically did like a kind of MI6 job on me and scammed me. And oh, you're not getting in.
It doesn't sound like it took a lot of interrogation. There was no one exactly, holding a rope with knots in it to you.
Exactly. We know how long I'd last in the field.
Are you 12 years old? No. Yes, I am. It's like the stoning in Life of Brian.
He said, "I'm sorry, I thought we'd started."
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The X-Cast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black. and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair, and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast Pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening, and keep watching the skies.